Chapter 1634. Before Wei Tsong was imprisoned in the back mountain of the Imperial Mausoleum, he had once been a flirtatious youth. He could still remember those years when the mountain flowers were in full bloom. Young men and women chatted happily, drinking elegantly or chatting merrily. They were full of youthful spirit. The night wind rustled the curtains. Wei Tsong leaned against the side of the table and slept lightly. He gradually fell asleep. Today's dream was unusually colorful. Everything became clear. He looked at the contents of the dream and vaguely remembered that this was the Golden Scale Academy. His gaze fell on the waterside pavilion. Seeing a group of youths in blue and white uniforms chatting and laughing together, he could not help but smile. Wei Tsong remembered. So was that day. Which day? Naturally, it was the day his mother broke the legs of the Minister of Work's son's son. Wei Tsong could not help but approach in an attempt to hear more clearly. At this moment, a familiar-looking youth said with a smile, "TSK, do you think that the Minister of Works is Shiryu's mother? She actually broke into the academy with such a thick stick and dragged her son out to break his legs. I was scared to death." The youth was also the son of a court official. He shared a table with Shiryu, the son of the Minister of Works. When a Minister of Works rushed in and dragged his son out by the collar, he was scared out of his wits. "I don't know if she's his mother or not, but it's doubtful if Shiryu is his son." The other youth opened his folding fan. His face was slightly round and immature, clearly the appearance of Wei Tsong when he was young. His brows were brimming with vitality, and there was no sign of the loneliness he had experienced after so many years. The Minister of Works is such a talented person. So why is his son so unworthy of cultivation? In my opinion, it's good enough that Shiryu only had his legs broken by his mother. She didn't kill him out of consideration for their blood relationship. Shiryu was the son of the Minister of Works by Yuexia, and her husband, Shizhong. Because Shiryu was the only male in the family, he was unruly spoiled by his father and grandmother. He acted arrogantly and often bullied the ordinary students of the academy. Wei Tsong was only the concubine's son of the Grand Tutor. He had naturally been bullied by Shiryu and harbored resentment in his heart. The youths were curious. "Wei Tsong, do you know the inside story of Shiryu being beaten?" Everyone was very surprised. The little tyrant Shiryu's leg was actually broken by his own backer. This could be said to be the news of the year. The wooden stick that Minister of Works by Yuexia used to break her son's legs was as thick as a strong man's arm. Why was the little tyrant so arrogant and despotic? Wasn't it because he had a mother who was the Minister of Works? Shiryu's father. The two of them had already separated 800 years ago. Shiryu's father, Shizhong, was even more useless. Naturally, I know some inside information. Shiryu deserves this. The youth said, "Shiryu has mediocre looks, mediocre talent, and mediocre looks. Logically speaking, he shouldn't be likable. But he has roots." Although the Minister of Works was there to correct and supervise him, it wasn't easy to be a strict mother. Shiryu was instigated by his family to leave his biological mother. In the end, he made a big mistake. Even a barbecued pork is better than him. Young Wei Tsong continued. 2 days ago, an imperial censor reported to the Minister of Works, saying that she didn't teach her son well. She allowed her son to force women into prostitution, commit violence on the streets, and cripple people on horseback. The Minister of Works returned to his residence to investigate and confirm that the matter was true. In a fit of rage, he beat his son with a rod. "How did you know this news?" Young Wei Tsong said, "Heavenly secrets cannot be revealed. There's always a way that I know." Seeing his dream self reveal the childish and gloating smile unique to youths, Wei Tsong's lips curled into a bitter smile. He clearly remembered that because of this matter, he had been punished by his father when he was young. His father heard that he was gossiping behind someone's back and criticized others. He said that this was not the conduct of gentlemen and punished him to copy books. The young Wei Tsong was in his rebellious period. His father's indiscriminate punishment made him very indignant. How was it that he wanted to make things difficult for Shiryu? It was clearly Shiryu, the little tyrant who privately bullied and humiliated Wei Kong. How did he humiliate him? He cursed him to his face for being concubine Tung's son, saying that his status was lowly, and that he didn't have the right to chat with a student from a good background. Not only did he humiliate his background and his mother, but he also humiliated his father's defeat in the imperial court several years ago. More than once, Wei Tsong was blocked in a remote corner of the academy by this little tyrant. He suffered these grievances, but he didn't dare complain to his father. Although Shi Yu's words were unpleasant to hear, there was one thing he was right about. His father was only the grand tutor, and he was only concubine Teng's son. If his father sought justice from the Minister of Works for him, it would implicate his father's already bad official career. As the saying went, birds of a feather flocked together. The little tyrant, Shi Yu, was a hedonistic son of rich parents, and his scoundrelly friends weren't good people either. Wei Tsong's background was lowly, but he was ranked among the best. He was often used as an example by his teacher to attack these slackers, imperceptibly attracting a lot of hatred. They knew that Wei Tsong was easy to bully and had no backing. They often joined forces to embarrass him, and verbal humiliation was considered light. There were few times when they got into a conflict. Wei Tsong was alone and weak, and his opponents outnumbered him. He was punched a few times. The place where they fought was very hidden, and they were very careful, not leaving behind any evidence. Wei Tsong's heart was only filled with anger and hatred. Every time this happened, he couldn't help but resent his background, but there was nothing he could do. He could only swallow the bitter fruit. He didn't dare tell his father, afraid that he would make things difficult for him. Fortunately, he had a few peers he was on good terms with, and they became his only channel to confide in. These peers were none other than the sons of his father's elder brother, Wei Tsong's cousins. In terms of age, Wei Tsong was about the same as them. In terms of seniority, Wei Tsong was their uncle. Now that he thought about it, it was the care and persuasion of these good friends that slowly alienated the young Wei Tsong from his father. The young Wei Tsong coldly watched the scenes that flashed through his dream. The scenes that had once made him angry and resentful couldn't stir up any of his emotions at this moment. The young Wei Tsong saw his younger self being locked in a room, copying books 20 times. He stubbornly refused to admit his wrongs to his father and stubbornly refused to stop writing. He copied from day to night before finally falling into a deep sleep. TSK, his temperament is quite like mine. Very stubborn. The young Wei Tsong's pupils constricted in shock. He saw the door being gently pushed open, as if afraid of disturbing the person inside. A tall woman stood outside the door. Time hadn't left many traces on her face, but her aura had become more restrained with the passage of time. This subject has failed to teach. The young Wei Tsong saw his father, whom he hadn't seen for many years, enter the room behind the woman in a green robe. His words seemed to be filled with emotion. Don't ask for forgiveness so easily. I've seen many people ask for forgiveness during the day. Are you going to do the same? The woman rebuked him, but her tone was very gentle. She bent down and picked up Wei Tsong, who was sprawled on the table, and gently placed him on the bed. She looked lovingly at the youth's eyes. At the end of the day, it's because I, as a mother, wasn't diligent enough. I didn't know that an academy student would commit such vile acts. Since your majesty has said so, shouldn't this subject apologize with death? The man's eyes were filled with apology and self-blame. He had raised Wei Tsong for so many years, but he hadn't realized that his child had suffered so much at Golden Scale Academy. If he hadn't found out by chance, he didn't know how long he would have been kept in the dark. He didn't know how to make up for it, even if he wanted to. The woman said, "You and I are both at fault. It's not your majesty's fault. Your majesty has a myriad of affairs to attend to every day. Just government affairs take up 16 to 16 hours. How can you have the extra energy to keep an eye on your child's matters at the academy?" The man helped young Wei Tsong tuck into the blanket and said softly, "The matter with the Minister of Works, her son has committed so many mistakes. It's already benevolent of her not to take that little beast's life." The woman sneered. "Is my son also someone that little beast can casually insult? If Bai Yuexia doesn't break his legs, I'll take my saber and chop off his head." Bai Yuexia raised her rod and broke her son's legs in public. On the surface, It was to punish and teach her son a lesson, but in reality, it was the woman's instigation. The imperial censor criticized by Yueshia for several days in a row, and the woman also had the intention of dealing with him severely. The intelligent by Yueshia naturally knew what to do. Was it more serious to have his legs broken by his mother, or to have his head chopped off by the emperor in a fit of rage? Choose for yourself. Although Bai Yueshia didn't know of Wei Tsung's past, she had followed Her Majesty for many years and understood Her Majesty's intentions. She was serious. The man sighed softly and tucked Wei Tsung's scattered hair behind his ears with his fingers. The woman said, Golden Scale Academy should also rest and reorganize. If something like this happens again, I'll cut off their parents as well. It was originally a place for students to study, but she didn't expect such a bullying scandal to appear in the Golden Scale Academy just a dozen years after it was established. Of all things, bullying Wei Kong. She simply didn't want to live. The woman said she wanted to reorganize the Golden Scale Academy, so she would definitely reorganize the entire academy. In that case, CI and Fusho will find an opportunity to have a good talk and console him. The woman nodded. Yes. The young Wei Tsung watched everything in his dream. His eyes were sore and swollen, and 2 streams of hot tears rolled down his cheeks. So that was the case. When Wei Tsung was young, he was bullied by his classmate, the little bully. However, after the Minister of Works, by Yueshia, personally broke Shiryu's legs, those bastards became obedient and no one came to provoke Wei Tsung again. At that time, Wei Tsung naively thought that by Yueshia's actions had a deterrent effect. So this was the truth. His mother was busy every day, yet she still took time out of her busy schedule to help him vent his anger. His father had also tried to talk to him and console him. However, the young Wei Tsung was willful and rebellious. He had long been instigated and bewitched by others, so he couldn't listen to his father's nagging and lecturing. If he could turn back time, he wouldn't have said those hurtful words to his sister, nor would he have been instigated to harm his parents. Vaguely, Wei Tsung heard a familiar call from the horizon. He struggled to open his eyes and found Ning Wanyue kneeling to the side, looking at him with concern. Wanyue? What happened? Wei Tsung heard his voice hoarse, and his face was wet. Was Langjun a nightmare just now? Ning Wanyue used a handkerchief to wipe away the tears on his face. Wei Tsung lowered his head and leaned on her shoulder. The candlelight elongated the shadows of the two snuggling together. Chapter 16:35. Jing Rong, do you have the guts to tell this to the Lord? Just because the Lord was diligent in governing, they suspected that she had been possessed by a wild spirit. Wasn't this indirectly saying that the Lord had been too lazy in the past? Even if Yang Si was telling the truth, the Lord did not like to hear it. If she really knew about it, Wei Si was worried that the weeds on Yang Si's grave would be 3 feet tall. I don't have the guts. I don't dare to do it. I was wrong. Yang Si quickly waved his hand. His desire to live had once again saved his life. Wei Si said, My lord has grown up. It's our good fortune. In his previous life, His Majesty had only started to work diligently after he had ascended to the throne. He was like a student who had wasted a whole summer vacation and was frantically rushing to finish his homework in the last few days. He had started to change early in this life, so he expected that his future situation would be much better than his previous life. At the very least, he would be able to avoid alienating his subjects to the greatest extent. Wei Si's sentiments came from the bottom of his heart, but Yang Si could not help but ridicule his prehistoric power. Grown up? The age at which people of the same age are going to propose marriage for their children? Yang Si glanced at Wei Si with a strange look in his eyes and smiled awkwardly. Grow up? Lord is getting old at this age. Wei Si, there was no need for his lord to make a move. He wanted to send Yang Si to paradise now. Even though Jiang Pengji always said that she was a slacker in her studies and that her cultural courses were the lowest among all the commanders, it did not mean that she was the slacker in everyone's impression. Sabanin, Peking University is still all right, said that Peking University was still all right. So was Peking University really just still all right? To ordinary people, it was still an existence that they needed to look up to. Similarly, when Jiang Pengji said that she was a slacker, it was only in comparison to people of the same level. Once she started to correct herself, everyone would be able to experience the crushing power of their lord in all aspects. Yang Si and the others were happy for less than 2 days before they complained incessantly. Jiang Pengji could usually finish the government affairs that normally took 3 days. What should she do with the remaining time? Naturally, it was to bring forward the matters that would happen in the next 4 or 5 days. As Jiang Pengji's subordinates, Yang Si and the others had to keep up with the pace. The faster the pace, the more pressure they were under. At this moment, Yang Si, Feng Zhen, and the others missed the days when their lord was a hands-off boss. Since her lord was a hands-off boss, she didn't delay her work. Now that she was in her workaholic mode, she was practically going to F***CK someone to death. In the past, I indulged myself in pleasures and neglected government affairs. Fortunately, you did not abandon me and have been tolerant until now. From now on, I will not disappoint you. Jiang Pengji's words were a positive promise. Not only did she admit that she had been distracted by playfulness, but she also promised that she would change. As a lord, she calmly admitted her mistakes to her subjects. Just this magnanimity alone was admirable. Yang Tao's old officials, who had been biased against her before, now looked at her in a new light. Of course, some people were gratified, while others expressed doubts. They thought that Jiang Pengji's popularity only lasted for a short period of time. Who asked her previous image to be so deeply ingrained in people's hearts? Not only these people, but even some of the salted fish thought so. They never expected Jiang Pengji to be serious and do what she said. Qing Feng Wenshu, the originally calm and mischievous host, has suddenly become a leader. I'm not used to it. AOD Luming. Really? Why do I feel that the host still likes to smile so much? Which leader would be like her? Boss, I want a carrot. Who said that being serious in speech and manner is the style of a leader? Tudu Fatio. I feel that the current host is more in line with her identity. Hippie fooling around is indeed very close to the people, but it is not always good to be close to the people. There will always be people who think that being close to people with power is equivalent to having power. Not everyone is self-aware. The host is friendly to them, but they feel that the host is easy to bully and does not have the dignity that a ruler should have. Once the subjects feel that the ruler has lost his dignity, they will overstep and even trample on him. There is no such phenomenon now, because the host is still a warlord in troubled times. She has a strong, murderous aura. No matter how cheeky she is, it can't hide the fact that she has killed countless people. But in the future, when the world is stable and the people live and work in peace, there will always be people who are blind and only remember the host's closeness to the people. They will forget the host's ruthlessness and then do something that oversteps. Comfort will erode a person's vigilance, and they will forget their previous caution. Diwaluo, you're right, boss. Being close to people with power and mistakenly thinking that you have power is a deep-rooted bad habit of insatiable greed. This reminds me of the babysitter case that caused an uproar a few years ago. The employer gave the babysitter a high salary and let her eat at the same table with them. He gave her red packets on holidays and helped the babysitter's son find a job. The employer treated the babysitter so well that the babysitter felt that she was superior. She stole and abused the child. In the end, because of a conflict, she wanted to kill the employer. She brought people to rob and kill the employer. There are countless similar cases. On the whole, the idle people were mostly supportive. Jiang Pengji gathered her thoughts. She had the intention to hide it, so she did not appear in public for several days. She had been recuperating from illness. Only a few trusted subordinates could see her. There was no doubt about the loyalty of Yang Si and the others. The spies on the Nan family's side naturally could not find anything. When they did not receive any news from the kamikaze warriors, the Nan family was initially a little shaken. No matter how careful the kamikaze warriors were, once they succeeded, they would get rid of the pursuers and return as soon as possible. But there was no news at the moment. There must be something wrong when things are abnormal. When they heard that Jiang Pengji had been sick since that day of winter swimming, they were not sure. Their hearts were like wild grass straddling the wall, swaying left and right. The news of Jiang Pingji's death in an ambush among the people became more and more intense. Wei Ci, the chief instructor of the Navy, not only did not come forward to suppress it, but he also sent people to add fuel to the fire. Not only did it make the people believe it, but even some officials who did not often see Jiang Pingji were also shaken, especially Yang Tao's former subordinates. A few people secretly try to find out what Yang Tao had said. What do they want to find out? Of course, they wanted to find out if Yang Tao had taken the opportunity to rise again. As a feudal lord, how could he be willing to bow down to another person? Of course, because the news of Jiang Pengji's death in an ambush had not been confirmed. When these people tried to find out, they were very vague. It could not be used as evidence, even if it was spread out. Yang Tao took into account their past friendship and sternly reprimanded those people, dispelling their thoughts. He knew very well whether Jiang Pengji was dead or not. The ambush of more than 100 kamikaze warriors could not hurt her at all. If they had any ulterior motives under her nose, they would not even know how they died. Yin Lin, the shrewd man, deliberately reminded Yang Tao not to reveal that Jiang Pengji was still alive, but he could not say that she was dead either. He had to be vague and ambiguous. Yang Tao suddenly understood, and his face looked awkward. Xiaoyang, are you worried that we have a mole among us? Yin Lin sighed. Whether the mole is one of us or not, we have to clear our name as soon as possible. Jiang Pengji was caught red-handed by the kamikaze warriors. Someone had to be a mole for the Nan family and pass the news to them. On the day of the incident, only Jiang Pengji, Yang Tao, and their guards were there. If Jiang Pengji's people were not bribed by the Nan family, then there was something wrong with Yang Tao. Chapter 1636. The Nan family chose this time to make a move on you because they want you to be their scapegoat. Regardless of whether the assassination is successful or not, you are the most suspicious person. If you want to clear your name, the only way is to help Lord Liu. Lord Liu, you don't need to do anything, but you don't need to do anything wrong. Yin Lin asked Yang Tao to help Jiang Pengji cover up the lie to clear his partner's name. Besides, Jiang Pengji was also aware of their every move. She knew better than anyone else what those old officials with ulterior motives had said and done to Yang Tao. Yin Lin asked Yang Tao to do this because he wanted to prove his innocence. There were too many twists and turns. Yang Tao didn't need to understand. He just needed to do what he was told. Yin Lin would take care of the rest for him. Yang Tao secretly bid farewell to his former minister, worry written all over his face. He said, I don't know how many spies I have around me. Why do they have to come after me? Yin Lin said, people in troubled times have no choice. Zhengzi doesn't want to get involved, but you can't avoid these things just because you don't want to. There would always be something that would force people, whether they were forced or willing, to walk on this thorny single-log bridge. It could be morality, ideals, protection, desire, power. Yang Tao did it to protect his family. What about Jiang Pengji? Even if there are thousands of people, I will go. Yang Tao was confused. What did you say? There are thousands of paths. Everyone has their own path, big or small, public or private. There is no such thing as high or low. You can follow your heart and do whatever you want. Thousands of paths lead to the same destination, Yin Lin said with a smile. I'm just curious. What was Liu Shi's original intention for walking on this path? Was it for the greater good or for love? No matter how I think about it, I only feel that this sentence seems to be the most suitable. Yang Tao blinked. He didn't understand. Yin Lin put his hand on his forehead and said, to put it simply, Lord Liu is a man with great ambition and a big heart. Yang Tao smiled. It's rare to see Xiaoyang praise someone like that. What a high compliment. Yin Lin shook his head. Our paths are different. Yin Lin didn't want to risk his life just to watch this kind of person. He didn't want to go all out and join in the fun. Using a marathon as an example, Yang Tao divided the entire 40-kilometer race into 8 segments. He only had to run 5 kilometers each time, and Yin Lin could take his time. Contestant Jiang Pengji, on the other hand, wanted to finish 100 kilometers in one go. 40 kilometers was only her interim goal. Hmm. Yin Lin admired her courage and ambition, but he didn't have the energy to finish the race with her. Yang Tao rested his chin on his hand. Xiaoyang, do you think I should confess to Lu Lanting and ask for her forgiveness? After all, they were old officials. Their relationship over the years was not fake. Yang Tao also did not want Jiang Pengji to settle scores with them. Yin Lin looked down. There's no need. Lord Lu won't do anything to them. At most, he'll scare them a little. Overall, it's more of a scare than a real danger. Between husband and wife, there were dozens of times throughout the year when the thought of separation would pop up. Their teeth and tongues would even fight, let alone between the monarch and the minister. He did not believe that Yang Si and the others had not thought of strangling their lord to death when Jiang Pengji repeatedly stood them up. However, it wasn't like they could put their thoughts into practice. They could just beat them up and educate them. There was no need to kill them all. Yang Tao let out an "oh" sound and felt relieved. Yin Lin said, if it's possible. Yang Tao turned to look at him. What? Don't leave your words unfinished. Yin Lin added, Zhengzi will try his best to confiscate the Nan family. Anyway, Jiang Pengji had borrowed Yang Tao's hands to confiscate many of the Nanxing aristocrats. She had offended them all, digging up graves, robbing people's wealth. Jiang Pengji bore half of the blame, and Yang Tao bore the other half as the executor. There was no need to worry when there were too many lice. There was no harm in wiping out the Nan family. If the Nan family died in Yang Tao's hands, not only would they stand firm, but they would also be cleared of suspicion. Yang Tao let out an "oh" sound and did not think too much about it. He just smiled and squinted his eyes. I heard that the Nan family is rich. That's a fat sheep. It's a good job indeed. I wonder if I can get it. It was an unspoken rule in the industry to seize some of the loot during a war. Many generals had made their fortunes by doing this. Now that there was still a war to fight, it would not be easy to raise a family when the world was at peace. Of course, as long as you ask. As a former feudal lord, Yang Tao's identity was a shortcoming, but it had its advantages. For example, if he took the initiative to perform meritorious deeds, no one could compete with him. Why? Of course, it was to appease Yang Tao and satisfy his small requests without affecting the overall situation. Yang Tao rejected the temptation of the former officials. Without a backbone, they could only sigh and give up. They continued to observe. The Nan family could not sit still. They joined forces with a few aristocrats who had a grudge against Jiang Pengji to stir up trouble. Unfortunately, they died before they could succeed. Their conspiracy was only at the theoretical level when Yang Tao and his men discovered it. The letters and testimonies that they found were all preserved. The idle people were stunned by the operation. Junguo Lauda, no. Shouldn't the streamer continue to pretend to be sick and dead? When the Nan family comes out with their troops, you will jump out and slap them in the face at the critical moment. They were only at the theoretical stage, and you already took action. It's not satisfying enough to slap them in the face. What was this like? It was like Jiang Pengji's eviscerating hand cut to a 5-minute trailer of an 81-episode political drama. Basically, the Nan family united the aristocrats. Just as they were about to go on stage, Jiang Pengji kicked them off the platform. The pace of this drama was as fast as the reincarnation of a hungry ghost. Even instant noodles lasted longer than it. One of the idle people asked the question that was on everyone's mind. Yewu Yinling. So, why did the streamer pretend to be sick and dead? To raid a few more houses, Jiang Pengji said. Didn't the Nan family unite 6 aristocrats in Fenzhou? They died a worthy death. Why did they have to wait for the fire to burn down the house before putting out the fire? It was better not to have this kind of hero reversal. Jiang Pengji watched the fire burn a few books with cold eyes. The smoke sounded the alarm, and the small fire was put out. The small fire that the Nan family stirred up was the small fire that did not amount to anything. She sneered. Didn't the Nan family curse me for robbing their family property and digging up their ancestral graves as bandits? Ha! I spared their lives out of kindness and did not care about my own well-being. Then I will take the lives of their entire family. I will kill the chicken to warn the monkey so that the later generations will see the consequences. The Nan family was just a clown in her eyes. She did not take them seriously. It was just that they thought too highly of themselves. They jumped up and down and did not let others have peace. If she did not set a role model, did the people of Nanxing really think that she was a soft persimmon that could be trampled on at will? With the fall of the Nan family, the aristocrats of Nanxing should calm down a little. If they still did not calm down, Jiang Pengji could only set a trap for them and kill them until they all shut up. As for the spy, Chapter 16:37. Everyone thought that the spy was on Yang Tao's side. Even Yang Tao himself was so worried. Unexpectedly, the final investigation revealed that Jiang Pengji had a problem. The spy bribed by the Nan family was not a trusted official. He was not even considered a mid-level official. He was just a small official who had no sense of existence, but could grasp some of Jiang Pengji's whereabouts. Jiang Pengji did not know whether to be angry or glad when she heard the news. She was angry at this person's betrayal and deception. She was glad that the person who made a mistake was not the trusted official. When Wei Si learned of this, he was really relieved. Although the emperor in the previous life was different from the lord in this life, the nature of the two was still the same. They hated betrayal the most. If a small character betrayed her, then so be it. The lord's anger was like a storm that would stop after a while. If the spy was a familiar face to the lord, then there would be no end to this matter. She would deal with it extremely ruthlessly. A typical example was Su Ku's rebellion in the previous life. After 2 or 3 years of allegiance, no one expected this rebellion. The impact was also quite far-reaching. When the emperor mentioned Su Ku in his later years, he still hated him and had the urge to dig his grave and flog his corpse. It was difficult for the emperor to raise troops in the previous life, but he did not suffer many losses. It could be counted on one hand. The one that left a deep impression was when Qiguan Rang assisted the old lord, Prince Changsho. When the emperor was at the front line, he led the troops and almost destroyed the emperor's nest. The other time was when Su Ku secretly instigated several middle-level generals to rebel. When the emperor was in a stalemate with the enemy, he used false information to trick the emperor into leading 500 soldiers into Jinqichuan. There were still 7,000 soldiers lying in ambush in the Jinqichuan Valley. Su Ku had planned for this for a long time. His plan was flawless. When everyone discovered the rebellion and led troops to reinforce the emperor, a day and a night had passed. TSK. If it weren't for Thief Lu's stupidity, courage, and arrogance, it wouldn't have taken you so long to realize that something was wrong. Su Ku's mockery was not unreasonable. The story of the wolf coming was often told. When the wolf really came, everyone could not believe it. Similarly, the emperor led the vanguard and frequently used the unconventional tactics. After a long time, everyone got used to it and their vigilance was greatly reduced. When she was plotted against by her trusted confidant and fell into danger, the civil and military officials in the tent did not react in time. Su Ku thought that His Majesty would definitely die. Even the people in the tent thought so. The military camp was preparing for the funeral. Unexpectedly, the people searching for His Majesty's body followed the bodies of the rebels and found His Majesty sitting in a daze in the middle of a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood. Wei Si had never seen that scene before, but he could imagine it from someone else's retelling. From the valley to her feet, the short distance of 1,000 feet was filled with countless broken limbs and remains. Blood gathered into a blood-red trickle. The pool of blood converged in one place, and the yellow mud on the ground could not absorb all of it in time. His Majesty, who had always been high-spirited, showed a rare look of disappointment. His eyes were red and bloodshot. Su Ku betrayed us. Qiguan Rang replied in a low voice, "Yes. Death by 1,000 cuts." His Majesty took a deep breath and added expressionlessly, "I'll do it." Qiguan Rang asked her, "My lord, you don't need to bring Su Ku here for interrogation. Why did he betray us?" Betrayal is betrayal. When he did this, he was already a dead man. His Majesty mocked in a hoarse voice, "I have no interest in his growth story. What kind of past did he have? What did he go through? And what did he do? Is this the reason why he betrayed me?" Qiguan Rang was silent. "Even if I don't interrogate him, I know why he did this. It was most likely for his old master. His Majesty sneered and said, he was so loyal to his old master, so I fulfilled his wish. He was willing to plot for his old master for many years to assassinate me, so he was also willing to bear the punishment of death by 1,000 cuts for him, right? Of course, in the end, Su-ku did not die by 1,000 cuts, but he was killed by His Majesty herself. His corpse was hung in Jinkichuan and could not be buried. The generals who accompanied Su-ku were not so lucky. They were almost all killed by His Majesty in one breath. His Majesty reprimanded whoever pleaded for them. During that time, everyone was in danger. Even if the counselors tried to persuade her with emotion and reason, telling her that killing so many generals at once would cause her to lose a lot of strength and ask her to think twice, they still did not have the determination to save His Majesty. His Majesty was determined to kill this group of rebels and traitors, even if he was willing to suffer a great loss of strength. Wei Ci remembered that after the Jiang dynasty was founded, a few officials who were on good terms with Su-ku wanted to take advantage of His Majesty's good mood to ask for mercy so that Su-ku's corpse could be buried. In the end, those officials were reprimanded by His Majesty. They were all ordered to be suspended from their duties and go home to reflect on themselves for 2 months. Until Wei Ci drew his sword and committed suicide in his previous life, Su-ku's corpse was still hung in Jinkichuan. From this, it could be seen that His Majesty's attitude towards the betrayal of a trusted official was that he would bear a grudge for a lifetime. Therefore, Wei Ci was glad that the traitors this time were minor characters. The Nan family and the gentry clans that the Nan family secretly colluded with were all wiped out by Yang Tao and his troops. The traitors were publicly executed by 1,000 cuts. This shock lasted for more than half a month before it finally subsided. Obviously, not much time had passed, but everyone had the illusion that it was a lifetime ago. The gentry clans of Nansheng, Fenzhou, and Jiangzhou were even more cautious. They were dispirited and listless, not daring to jump around for a short period of time. This was because they realized that the superiority of the gentry clans did not work in front of Jiang Pengji, a bandit tyrant. Her capital to establish a foothold in this chaotic world was not controlled by the gentry clans. She did things unscrupulously, committing murder, arson, and looting with a clear conscience. She was a smelly, hard, and stubborn rock in the latrine. The gentry clans, as precious goose eggs, collided with her. The gains did not make up for the losses. They could not afford to provoke her, The chaos on Jiang Pengji's side had just calmed down, but a new storm was brewing in the other 2 places, affecting the situation of the entire world. One was Qiguan Rang and Sun, one of Zhanjiang Pass. When these 2 black-hearted people got together, their black-bellied index was off the charts. They would plot against whoever they wanted. The other was in Chui's side. His beloved concubine, the Princess of Xichong, was diagnosed to be more than a month pregnant during the new year. The new year was coming, and Chui, who had been suffering from an unmentionable illness for many years, had successfully gotten his beloved concubine pregnant. This was double happiness, and Chui was ecstatic. In his joy, and Chui rewarded the 3 armies to celebrate. Everyone was happy and harmonious. However, Nieqing of Zhongzhou was not in the mood to celebrate the new year. The gloomy atmosphere of the Nie family was a stark contrast to Chui. Nieqing had experienced the deaths of his father and father-in-law, as well as the betrayal of his cousin, Nie Yang. This allowed him to grow rapidly in a short year. Sadly, the speed of Nieqing's growth could not keep up with the changes in the situation in Zhongzhou. Speaking of which, it made people sigh. Thinking back to when Ye Yang was still around, Nieqing was the target of everyone's fawning. Chapter 1638. Outside, there were enemies eyeing covetously. Inside, there were hidden dangers. Everything was in chaos. The increasing pressure and the ever-present schemes caused Nieqing to lose weight day by day. Not long after, he was so skinny that he was only left with bones. When all these heavy burdens fell on a young man's shoulders, his fine black hair turned white in just a few short months. Not only that, Nieching would often fall into a trance, his haggard appearance making people feel bitter. Who would have thought that this thin and frail young man in front of them was a high-spirited and carefree noble son of a landowning household 2 years ago? Anyone who saw Nieching's transformation couldn't help but sigh. However, no one would give up their ambitions just because they sympathized with Nieching. Even if Nieching had the intention to unite all the forces within Zhongzhou and form an alliance to resist Jiang Pengji's forces, would those who flaunt their seniority listen to Nieching? To them, the Nie family was like a starving camel that was still bigger than a horse. Nieching was still a stumbling block in their way and had to be removed. Even if someone was willing to temporarily stop fighting for the sake of the big picture, Qiguan Rang and Sun were not just for show. How could they allow Nieching to reunite the scattered forces of Zhongzhou? As soon as Jiang Pengji led her troops to Zhongzhou, the two of them got together and formulated a series of plans against Zhongzhou. After picking and choosing, they finally decided to secretly support a puppet force. Although it was a puppet faction, it had a certain amount of connections and resources in Zhongzhou. It was a local faction that was born and bred in Zhongzhou. Back then, if it weren't for the fear of the Nie clan's despotic power and Nielyang's methods, the leader of this force wouldn't have so easily submitted. TSK, you say that you're subservient, but you actually have the heart of a tiger. Qiguan Rang smiled as he read through all the information about this person. He said to Sun Wen curiously, "It's a pity that his heart is higher than the sky, but his life is thinner than paper. If he was so ambitious, why didn't Nielyang deal with him before he died? If we leave such a disaster alive, even if we don't make use of him, he will become a huge problem for Nieching in the end." Sun Wen didn't even bother to bat an eyelid. Although Nielyang is talented, he is not a god. Zheng Hao was ambitious, but he was also smart. So many ambitious hidden dangers have been eliminated by Nielyang, allowing Zheng Hao to slip through the net. Either Zheng Hao's schemes are deeper than we expected, and he even deceived Nielyang's calculations. Either this person's ambition doesn't match his ability, and Nielyang doesn't take him seriously. Sun Wen wasn't too worried about Zhongzhou. After his lord's torment, Zhongzhou had already been beaten half to a pulp and had become a fish on the chopping block. Qiguan Rang smiled and said Zidao is right. Which category do you think Zheng Hao belongs to, Wenzheng? Qiguan Rang did not answer. The two old foxes looked at each other and smiled. Those who had been tricked by them did not know what would happen to them in the future. Feng Yi could barely understand what they were saying, but Sun Lan, who was not good at scheming, was still confused. Junior has a question. He was a studious student. If he didn't understand something, he would ask. Now, there were elders to guide him, learn more, and ask for guidance. When he could take charge of things by himself in the future, who else could he count on? Sun Wen asked, "What is it?" Sun Lan said, "Military advisor Qiguan said that Zheng Hao has the heart of a tiger and a wolf. He won't be willing to be a puppet. If we support him, will we really not be bitten?" It was too embarrassing to be reared and trained by a dog, and then be bitten by the dog in the end. Sun Wen smiled, but did not speak. Qiguan Rang asked Feng Yi, "What do you think?" Wrongly. Feng Yi said, "Military advisor Sun also said that Nielyang's calculations left Zheng Hao out. Junior thinks that Zheng Hao belongs to the latter. Ambition and ability don't match." Qiguan Rang asked again, "What's the reason?" Feng Yi said, "Although Nielyang is Nieching's father, he spoils his son like he kills his own. If he helps Nieching clean up even the small gravel before he dies, he won't be able to become a practice target for Nieching to use magic stones on. This isn't really helping him, it's harming him." Qiguan Rang and Sun Wen didn't react. Feng Yi continued, "Moreover, since the two military advisors have chosen Zheng Hao, Junior boldly judges that Zheng Hao will not have the chance to grow into a dog that bites back. Therefore, Junior is not worried. If these words came from someone else's mouth, it would inevitably sound like flattery. However, Qiguan Rang and Sun Wen had watched Feng Yi grow up. They were well aware of her temperament. Qiguan Rang said, "I originally thought that you and Feng Zi didn't really look like father and son, but now that I see it, There's one thing that you two share the same origin. Feng asked, what is it? Qiguan Rang said, clever. Feng didn't use a long explanation to reason and analyze. She only used the simplest information to deduce a conclusion. Although there was some element of opportunism, turning complicated things into simple things was also a kind of skill. This fellow Feng, he has a bright future. Feng smiled bashfully at the good-natured teasing of her uncles. Qiguan Rang and the others had finalized their plan. As a puppet being supported, Zheng Hao didn't think of himself as a puppet being controlled. His cooperation with Qiguan Rang and the others was mutually beneficial. Their positions were equal. Qiguan Rang and the others could plot against Zheng Zhao through him. He could also obtain support through Qiguan Rang, accumulate resources, and then counterattack when he matured. Both sides had their own ulterior motives. To use an analogy, both sides were peacefully shaking hands and signing a contract on the surface, but behind the scenes, they were sharpening their knives. Qiguan Rang was waiting for the right time, while Zheng Hao was enduring hardships to gain courage. With the secret support of Qiguan Rang and the others, Zheng Hao gradually annexed a lot of territory and slowly gained confidence. He could even ignore Nie Qing's dispatches and orders. Under Qiguan Rang's instructions, he even caused Nie Qing a lot of trouble, sowing discord in the alliance plan proposed by Nie Qing. Zheng Hao's advisor was a little worried about the current situation. General, Qiguan Rang and Sun Wen under Lu Shi's camp are both her confidants. She left the two of them at Zhanjiang Pass with ill intentions. Cooperating with them is tantamount to asking a tiger for its skin. We might as well reconsider this matter. Zheng Hao waved his hand to interrupt his advisor. He sighed heavily and said, "Do you think I don't know this? However, this is our only chance to get rid of the Nie family. It wasn't easy for Nie Liang to die, and now his son has climbed over my head. He's just a naive and incompetent brat. What ability does he have to order me around? I know Qiguan Rang has ill intentions, but I still have to try." The advisor was also aware of Zheng Hao's ambition, but he still felt uneasy. To Zheng Zhao, Zheng Hao's actions were treason and treason. If the aristocrats of Zheng Zhao found out, not only would they lose the hearts of the people, but they would also be reviled by their descendants for thousands of years. Was it worth paying the price of eternal infamy for a moment of ambition? Chapter 1639. Since Zheng Hao was so confident, the advisors who liked to flatter naturally boasted brainlessly. They had the same unfounded confidence as Zheng Hao. Or rather, they had never seen the combination of Qiguan Rang and Sun Wen. They did not have a concrete understanding of how scary these two people were. The advisors who were not willing to flatter naturally did not think highly of Zheng Hao's idea. Didn't Zheng Hao check his opponent's achievements before asking a tiger for its skin? Needless to say, Qiguan Rang did not have a strong presence, but if the things he had done were to be shown, it would be extremely frightening. What about Sun Wen? Sun Wen's presence was much stronger than Qiguan Rang's. Let's not talk about the unlucky people in the north borderline first. Let's talk about a more recent example. Jiang Pengji had caused Nie Liang's halberd to sink into the sand, and Sun Wen had contributed a lot. Which fool would treat Sun Wen as an ordinary old man when he schemed against the enemy without batting an eyelid? The combat power of these two people added together was not as simple as 1 + 1. However, no gambler was willing to listen to words that were not beneficial to them. Zheng Hao was that gambler, confident that he could bite off a large piece of meat from the hands of the banker who was cheating. Anyone with a discerning eye would know that Zheng Hao, the fat sheep, was about to be slaughtered by the banker, but the gamblers who placed their bets did not think so. Anyone who prevented them from placing their bets was an enemy who prevented them from getting rich overnight. Therefore, the suggestions of a few advisors who were rational were thrown to the back of Zheng Hao's mind. The advisors' suggestions did not cause much of a splash when they had more people against fewer people. When Zheng Hao tasted the sweetness of the bet, he cared even less about the advisors' honest words that were unpleasant to the ear. "Ha! It's rare to see a brat like Nie Qing speak softly. Zheng Hao placed Nie Qing's letter upside down on the table. He stroked his beard and revealed a somewhat carefree and proud smile. When Nie Qing's father, Nie Liang, was still alive, Zheng Hao was always afraid that Nie Liang would settle accounts with him. For so many years, he lived with fear and trepidation. In order to curry favor with Nie Liang, he even used a roundabout foreign policy to curry favor with Nie Liang's relatives, such as Nie Qing. In terms of age, he was a full 10 years older than Nie Liang. In terms of seniority, he was one generation higher than Nie Liang, the same generation as Nie Liang's father and Nie Qing's grandfather. A few years ago, at Nie Qing's wedding, he had sent a large gift to Nie Qing, but he had received 2 replies. One was a normal thank you letter. The writing was very official, and it was obvious that someone else had copied it on his behalf. There was no sincerity in it at all. The other was Nie Qing's personal reply, but the contents made Zheng Hao so angry that his face turned ashen. In the letter, Nie Qing tactfully pointed out that Zheng Hao, as a county magistrate of a small place, should focus on the livelihood of the people and benefit the people. He should not plunder the wealth of the people to fill his own pockets. Following that, he converted the generous gifts that Zheng Hao had sent into silver and confiscated it. When Zheng Hao found out about Nie Qing's actions, he was instantly enraged and secretly cursed Nie Qing for being a hypocrite. Why was he scolding her like that? Nie Qing's father, Nie Liang, was a ruthless person who would even kill his own family. In order to develop his influence and fight for power in the Nie family, his hands were not clean at all. The things he did were much more ruthless and dark than Zheng Hao. As Nie Qing's father, since Nie Liang was such a righteous gentleman, righteous as the wind, shouldn't he be the first to slap his father in the face? In the end, Zheng Hao was ridiculed by the other party, comparing Nie Liang and himself. And then looking at Nie Qing's hypocritical actions, Zheng Hao bore a grudge against Nie Qing. He had sent a generous gift, but had been scolded by the groom that the gift had not come from a proper source. Now that the tables had turned, Zheng Hao was elated. After his mockery, he picked up the flipped letter again and read each word carefully, as if savoring that wonderful taste. "General, will Nie Qing's side detect it?" Zheng Hao asked in response. "Detect what? So what if he does?" Without Nie Liang's protection, without Wei Yang's schemes, Nie Qing is just a puppy that has not been weaned. So what if he barks at people? Can he bite me to death when he's fierce? In other words, Zheng Hao did not think much of Nie Qing. The equipment that Nie Liang had left for Nie Qing before his death had been stripped clean by Jiang Pengji. What kind of storm could this fierce puppy do? The advisor said worriedly, Nie Qing is not a threat, but if he reveals the fact that General is secretly conspiring with Lu Shi, there is also a chain of contempt between the gentry. Because Zhongzhou was once the strongest of the 5 countries, the gentry also had an inexplicable sense of superiority. Dongqing was in the middle and lower reaches of the chain of contempt. Their attitude towards Jiang Pengji was neutral and repulsive. In addition, Jiang Pengji had killed so many of Nie Liang's elites and generals. Most of those generals were inextricably linked to the gentry of Zhongzhou. New hatred and old hatred naturally made them even more disgusted. To put it lightly, Zheng Hao's actions were helping an outsider. To put it more seriously, Zheng Hao was a traitor who had committed treason and would be collectively targeted by the gentry of Zhongzhou. It was not that Zheng Hao had not considered it, but in the face of benefits, what was a crisis worth? Furthermore, don't worry. Nie Qing won't say anything because he has no evidence, Zheng Hao said confidently. This child that Nie Liang gave birth to really doesn't look like his son. Nie Qing does things by the book and is very dumb. Without solid evidence, he won't casually slander others. I have been very careful in my cooperation with the people from Dongqing and did not leave any traces. Even if Nie Qing wants to reprimand me, he can't. The advisor said, Nie Qing's temperament is indeed. It was not that Nie Qing was too naive, but his thinking was different from the feudal lords in troubled times. He was more of a gentleman. If Nie Qing had been born in the prosperous times, It would have been a matter of time before he became a famous scholar with the name of Righteousness and Righteousness. It could only be said that Nieching was born at the wrong time. He should not have been born in troubled times. The advisor suggested that Nieching strike first and gain the upper hand. He should take the lead and label the disrespectful Zheng Hao as a traitor. He could use the method of borrowing others' strength to make Zheng Hao a target and let others attack him. He could use this to curb Zheng Hao's momentum. Regardless of whether Zheng Hao had really committed treason or not, it would at least teach him a lesson and let him know how to restrain his arrogance. Nieching was indecisive. He had his own thoughts. It would be fine if Zheng Hao is not wrongly accused. If he is wrongly accused, it will inevitably affect the confidence of the alliance. Nieching sighed. Ever since the Battle of Zhanjiang Pass, everyone's expression has changed at the mention of Lu Shi, and they have lost the confidence to resist. It was not easy to restore some morale. If we slander the alliance now for colluding with the enemy, I don't know what others will think. It will be hard to avoid panic, and the people's hearts that have gathered will scatter like a plate of loose sand. The advisor's thoughts were more radical. The focus of his thoughts was on how to suppress and curb Zheng Hao's momentum and arrogance. He did not think much about the possibility of slander. Nieching's focus was on the irreversible consequences of accidentally slandering Zheng Hao. Chapter 1640. The advisor was well aware of this and could only use the deceased Nie Liang and Wei Dan to force Nieching. Indeed, everything has its pros and cons. However, regardless of Zheng Hao's innocence, his rise will do us more harm than good. My lord, please reconsider. Nieching sighed in his heart. He really did not want to waste his strength in internal strife and benefit Qiguan Rang, who was eyeing him covetously. Thus, he repeatedly tolerated the feudal vassals who were pressuring him. Little did he know that his tolerance for the greater good, in the hearts of those ambitious people, would instead prove his incompetence and cowardice. Let me think about this matter for another night. I'll give you an answer tomorrow. Nieching sat in front of his father's token for an entire night and gave his official a reply the next day. What? Zheng Hao received the news one step ahead and was stunned. At the same time, he felt his face hurt. Half a month ago, he had confidently said that Nieching was incompetent and would not make things difficult for him without evidence. He did not expect to be slapped in the face half a month later. Not only was Nieching going to make a move, but he also planned to kill him so that there would be no evidence. To put it bluntly, he wanted to kill Zheng Hao, who had been jumping around recently, as a sacrifice to the heavens. Huffed, kill the chicken to warn the monkeys and establish his might. If Zheng Hao had not planted eyes and ears in the Nye family, he would not have received the news 2 days in advance. I really underestimated this little beast. He dares to bite me without any teeth. Zheng Hao cursed in his heart. He was very sure that Nieching did not have evidence against him, but he did not expect Nieching to change his character. Not only did he make a move without evidence, he actually planned to sneak up on him. Regardless of whether Zheng Hao is innocent or not, he would first behead him and randomly accuse him of crime. One of the younger advisors could not sit still and said, "General, the only thing we can do now is to avoid the brunt of the attack." Zheng Hao scolded unhappily. Is there something wrong with your brain? How do you have the face to give me advice with that brain of yours? Avoid the brunt of the attack? Nieching, this little beast, does not even intend to let me live. What's the use of avoiding the brunt of the attack now? The more we avoid it, the more it proves that we have a guilty conscience and become Nieching's burden. Nieching is heartless, so don't blame me for being unjust. Of course, it's an eye for an eye. Qiguan Rang and Sun chose Zheng Hao because they knew that his temper was more unyielding. When he was underestimated, Zheng Hao knew to tuck his tail between his legs. Once he gained the upper hand, Zheng Hao's tail would start flying. Not only would he face people head-on, but he would also be headstrong. Qiguan Rang and his brother's original intention was to incite internal strife in Zhongzhou so that they could sit on the sidelines. The conflict between Zheng Hao and Nieching was the fuse of internal strife. The fuse had been lit, But whether or not the fire of this internal strife could burn so fiercely that it could destroy the entire foundation of Zhongzhou would depend on how Qiguanrang and his companion would add fuel to the fire and drag more people into it. Zhangjiang Pass. Qiguanrang could not help but smile when he received the news that Zheng Hao had made the first move. Zidao, you've won this round. Qiguanrang's words had a double meaning. He was referring to both the game of Go in front of them and their predictions of Zheng Hao and Nieqing. Qiguanrang's guess was closer to the truth. Although Zheng Hao's momentum was fierce, he could not fight Nieqing head-on. He could only choose to strike first to gain the upper hand. Taking advantage of the fact that Nieqing had not sent the news of the purge to his subordinates, he led his troops to deceive Nieqing's territory, Gaofeng City. He tricked the city guard into opening the city gates. Once the city gates were opened, the guard was killed when he was unprepared. Gaofeng City changed hands in less than half a day. By the time Nieqing received the news, Zheng Hao had already won 2 cities. The crowd was in an uproar. Qiguanrang's guess was not far from the truth. Sun Wen, on the other hand, was slightly off the mark. He had underestimated Zheng Hao's ambition and greed. I'm getting old. An old man's brain is getting duller and duller. I can't compete with young people. He spoke modestly, but there was no displeasure on his face. He happily took out a few golden melon seeds and gave them to Qiguanrang. These two were not only playing Go to compete, they were also playing for stakes. Small bets were pleasing, but large bets were harmful. Using the game of Go as a bet had tainted elegant actions with the smell of dung. Which dung? They regarded money as dung. Qiguanrang laughed. Zidao is old but strong. It's still too early to say such things. Sun Wen smiled faintly and didn't comment. After the game, the two cleaned up and planned to discuss another game around the stove. It was snowing heavily outside, but it was warm and cozy inside the room. Zheng Hao is a qualified chess piece, but the entire game can't be supported by one chess piece. Similarly, if Zhongzhou wants to become completely chaotic and waste its resources on internal strife, Zheng Hao alone won't be enough. Qiguanrang held a glass cup of wolfberry tea and added a spoonful of thick honey to it. He lamented the corrupt life of the rich while enjoying himself. Nieqing's personality isn't like his father's, but he's not the same. Isn't this a surprise? Zheng Hao can only be considered a whetstone in front of him. Wasn't that right? Nieliang had counted everyone, but left out Zheng Hao and the others. Wasn't he planning to use Zheng Hao and the others to sharpen Nieqing? From this, it could be seen that in Nieliang's calculations, Zheng Hao was no match for Nieqing. The two old foxes gathered together to play Go and chat. With a few words, they had decided the future of Zhongzhou. How could they escalate the internal strife in Zhongzhou? Not only did they have to drag more people into the water, but they also had to ensure that Zhangjiang Pass wouldn't give them external pressure. Without external threats, the signs of internal strife had risen again. With a gentle breeze to help the fire, wouldn't this game of Go be set up? Sun Wen took the opportunity to throw out a bombshell and drag those who had been watching from the sidelines into the water. This bombshell had something to do with a certain neutral power in Zhongzhou. This power was originally attached to the Nie family. After Nieliang's death, they took advantage of Nieqing's unfavorable position to become independent. Sun Wen's bombshell became the fuse for this neutral power to go against the Nie family. The bombshell was about the good deeds done by a legitimate son of the Nie family during the Nie family's heyday. How do you know? Qiguanrang was very curious about what other gossip Sun Wen had in his hands. No, a trump card. Every time he played it at the most critical moment, it would achieve unexpected results. Sun Wen said coldly, "As a father, I naturally pay more attention to what the murderer of my son has done." The descendant of the Nie family who killed Sun Wen's only son had dealings with many landowning women. Some had done so willingly, and some had done so unwillingly. His only son, Sun Lai, had won first place at the assembly. Although the descendant of the Nie family bore a grudge against him, it wasn't to the extent that the other party would break his legs out of humiliation and send him to the border on a groundless charge. Sun Lai had written an article at the assembly, and the content of the article had poked at the other party's sore spot. An article. Qiguan Rang had a respectful attitude and hadn't investigated the death of Sun Wen's only son. Thus, he didn't know exactly what had happened at the time. Hearing Sun Wen mention it, he asked a few more questions. What about the article? Sun Wen's mouth twitched. An article that used something to mock others, attacking the chaos in the landowning families. It hoped that the foppish sons who had a disgraceful style of conduct would sober up and reflect on themselves. They would respect themselves and not insult their families and bring shame to their ancestors. However, different people have different interpretations. The author may not have intended it, but the reader has. The descendant of the Nye family mistakenly thought that Lai had seen him having an affair in the backyard and used it to threaten him. That's why he wanted to kill him. Chapter 1641. Sun Lai's death was caused by many reasons, and not just one or two. First of all, the direct descendant of the Nye family was arrogant and domineering, and he could not tolerate others suppressing his limelight. However, Sun Lai's article not only suppressed his limelight, but also stabbed straight at his sore spot, causing him to mistakenly think that Sun Lai was threatening him with an illicit affair. Finally, there was also Nye Yang fanning the flames from his side, pushing his only 50% killing intent to 10%. Sun Wen's heart was filled with hatred. Even in his dreams, he wanted to kill the murderers involved one by one. He dug 3 feet into the ground and investigated the events of that year again and again to ensure that no fish escaped the net. The person who killed his only son must die. Even his grandson, Sun Lan, did not know that after so many years, Sun Wen had not walked out of the pain. Every time he woke up from a nightmare in the middle of the night, he could not help but silently read the information he had sorted out, word by word, as if he wanted to use it to engrave everyone in it into his bones. In order to make his revenge perfect, he made countless assumptions and plans. So, this person is also a pawn of Zaidao. Qiguan Rang was speechless. Fortunately, the old man's son, Wen, was an ally. If he was an enemy, he would have a headache. Who knew when Sun Wen began to scheme and set up a trap? He could even bring out a small, invisible person who had no sense of existence to make use of. He was really afraid of him. To be honest, this drive was similar to how his lord squeezed people to death. Sun Wen knew what Qiguan Rang was afraid of and could not help but laugh. The old man in front of you is just a mortal. He is no different from ordinary people in life, death, love, hate, and separation. He is not a god, and he will not be able to calculate everything. If Sun Wen was so powerful, his only son Sun Lai would not have died so tragically. These words came from the bottom of his heart. From Sun Wen's point of view, he just had more time and thought more than others. He tried to make up for the loopholes as much as possible, which seemed more comprehensive. Qiguan Rang laughed. Zaidao is being modest. Sun Wen said, "These years in Dongqing, I don't know much about the situation in Zhongzhou. I don't have any useful pawns on hand." In other words, he could only make full use of the limited pawns to achieve unlimited value. Only then would it not be a waste. Furthermore, it is the father's fault to raise and not to teach. The teaching materials of the Golden Scale Academy had profound meaning. Just 6 words were enough to express the responsibilities of a parent. That bastard raised a shameless slut who had an affair with another man before marriage. He even indirectly caused the death of my son. Of course I can blame this on him. Sun Wen's logic of venting his anger on others resonated deeply with Qiguan Rang. The two men's worldviews were particularly in tune. Qiguan Rang had taken Sun Wen, who was a generation older than him, as a confidant. Sun Wen was delighted. When the old man turned his head and saw his grandson's aggrieved face, he suddenly remembered the important matter at hand. His ultimate goal was not to become Qiguan Rang's friend, but to become his in-laws. "It's okay, Lan Lan. Grandpa is quite satisfied with Qiguan Rang's look at you. He's so smart, there's no way he wouldn't understand hints." Sun Wen sounded a little guilty. Sun Lan asked, "What if military counselor Qiguan pretends to be confused?" Sun Wen, if that was the case, there was really nothing he could do. One family's daughter is sought after by many families. If you want to marry a good girl, how can you not suffer some setbacks? Sun Wen comforted his grandson and encouraged him at the same time. Doesn't the Academy always teach that sincerity can open metal and stone? How can it be so easy to get the daughter of someone else? Sun Lan's eyes were filled with resentment. A good girl was hard to find, but hard to find also had different levels of difficulty. Obviously, Qiguan Rang's difficulty was hellish. Young people who were not smart enough should not hit a wall, or they might even lose their lives. Sun Wen sighed. No father-in-law in the world is easy to please. If Lan Lan was a girl, Grandpa wouldn't have handed her over so easily. Qiguan Rang didn't know about this. How could that be? Sun Wen got along with him exceptionally well. Apart from the fact that their worldviews matched, the other reason was that Sun Wen wanted to be on good terms with him. In terms of worldviews, Yang Si, Feng Zhen, and the others were also on the same level. Why didn't Sun Wen get along with them? Wasn't it because these people didn't have daughters of the right age at home, and Sun Wen's grandson had his eyes on his daughter? He was indeed pretending to be confused. His daughter wasn't even of marriageable age, and he had other plans for his daughter's future. Whether Sun Lan was a qualified husband still needed to be observed carefully. If Sun Lan wasn't suitable, Qiguan Rang wouldn't relent even at the risk of offending Sun Wen. They were all important officials under the Lord, and no one was inferior to the other. If the two of them really became enemies, Qiguan Rang might not be at a disadvantage. Of course, if Sun Lan was qualified, the two families would become in-laws. That would be a strong alliance, and there would be no harm in it. The two old foxes' calculations were making a lot of noise. The target of their calculations didn't feel comfortable at all. When Sun Wen bore a grudge against someone, he naturally wanted to kill him. The person that Sun Wen was staring at with his death stare was surnamed Zhou. His daughter had married into the aristocratic family, and after she reached marriageable age. Both the Yin family and the Zhou family were originally attached to the Nie family and relied on others. They were third-rate families with small clansmen. The ancestors of both families were of low birth, and they only had today's prosperity after several generations. They knew that development wasn't easy, and they cherished their feathers. What Sun Wen wanted to do was to tell the leaders of the two families that the aristocratic family's wife had affairs with the Nie family's direct descendants several times after marriage, and that the father of her son was unknown. At the same time, he would fan the flames and completely anger the two families' ambitions and hatred. Naturally, he would pull the Nie family's hatred. Originally, it was just the internal strife between Zheng Hao and Nie Qing. Halfway through, Zhou and it got involved, and the situation became even more chaotic. Zhou and it understood the Nie family very well. If they really rebelled and joined the war, Nie Qing would probably be badly battered. Which man in the world would tolerate the humiliation of being cuckolded? A rival in love used his family background to cheat on his wife, and even gave him a son of unknown bloodline. Who could tolerate that? Reality proved that he could really tolerate it. If the Nie family hadn't suffered a great loss, if Zheng Hao hadn't been there, this man could really tolerate being cuckolded and having a son of unknown bloodline in front of power and family interests. Many aristocratic families put interests first. Even if they knew that their wife had been cheated on, and that their son might not be their own, they could still pretend to be ignorant for the sake of interests. The problem was, did the current Nie family still have the power to intimidate others? Without such power, how could Lady Yin, who had been cuckolded, endure the humiliation of being cuckolded? When Sun Wen's information was sent to Mr. Cuckolded, he immediately went to settle the score with his wife. Chapter 1642. His actions were very abrupt and rude, waking up his sleeping son. His son was so frightened that he started crying. Mr. Green Hat was extremely impatient, and his eyebrows were full of displeasure. The lady was shocked. "What's wrong, Lang Jun? Why can't we talk things out? Why scare the child? All of you get out. I have something to say to Madam." Mr. Green Hat suppressed his anger and waved the servants away. After all the servants had left, he asked his wife directly whose son she had given birth to. The lady was a little guilty and confused. She said vaguely, Why are you suddenly asking this? Could it be that someone is making irresponsible remarks in front of you? Langjun knows best who my son is. Why do you have to accuse me of being innocent? Mr. Greenhair asked, before you got pregnant, did you have an ambiguous relationship with that animal from Madame Ye? Did you use the gathering as an excuse to have sex? The noblewoman's expression changed drastically, and her exquisite makeup was almost ruined by the shock. Langjun, where did you hear such slanderous words about me? It's fine if you don't believe me, but how can you doubt your beloved legitimate son just because of an outsider's words? Mr. Greenhair sneered. It doesn't matter if you don't admit it. You know best whether you did it or not. Maybe you don't even know whose son the child is? I didn't ask you who you had sex with before marriage, but you're still so restless after marrying into Madame. How can you face me? The more she spoke, the more ashamed she became. Whenever she thought of her legitimate wife being cheated on, the humiliation followed her like a shadow. Before the 4 self-accomplishment classics for women was popular in Zhongzhou, relationships between men and women were not conservative. The higher one's status and power, the more so. It was normal for widows with power to keep gigolos. It was normal for unmarried daughters to have 1 or 2 male confidants. The circle of the gentry was more open. However, after marriage, she would have to consider her husband's and her family's reputation and focus on taking care of her husband and children. This was the tacit understanding of the circle many years ago. Of course, after the 4 self-accomplishment classics for women came out, the men of Zhongzhou suddenly became more demanding of women. The unspoken rules that had been considered normal became intolerable. It was like this before marriage, let alone after marriage. Because of this, the husband and wife quarreled. They weren't hysterical, but other than not fighting, they basically didn't leave any face for each other. Since you have so many complaints against me, why did you pretend to be deaf and mute before? Mr. Cuckold pressed her further, and the lady was irritated. Instead of being angry, she laughed sarcastically. You know very well why you're making a scene in my house. If the Nye family is still as dignified as before, even if I have a child with that person from the Nye family, and it's still unclear after marriage, would you dare to fart? You can't even fart. He was afraid that he would tacitly agree that his wife had served him well, so that he could seize the opportunity to gain benefits. I'll be frank with you. Even the pimps in the brothel have more guts than you. Ask yourself honestly, do you really not know the relationship between me and that person? Not even a whisper? What a joke. You probably know something, but you don't dare to delve into it in order to avoid it, right? Why are you pretending to be a man to settle the score with me? If you have the ability, why don't you bring people to kill that person? Let's go now. What kind of hero was he if he didn't have any ability and only knew how to yell at inner-house girls? Do you think I'm willing? If I tell you, would you dare to stand up for me because of your power? Coward. Mr. Cuckold's face turned ashen. Why wouldn't I dare? The lady said bitterly. Of course you dare now. Is the Nye family still the Nye family of the past? If it was in the past, would you dare to speak up? Your whole family, old and young, are just the dogs of the Nye family. Today's Nye family is just an old worm with all its teeth pulled out, yet it still occupies the mountain and claims to be the king. You have long been unconvinced and have long planned to rebel and stand on your own. But because of your face, you are unwilling to bear the reputation of betraying the old master and being ruthless. Now that you're questioning me, you just want to use me as a raft to launch an attack on the Nye family. Say one more word. Mr. Cuckold's most secretive ambition was mercilessly exposed by his wife, and he became angry out of shame. Even if you say 10 or 20 more words, I dare. The lady sneered and said fearlessly, with just you alone, even if you rebel against the Nye family, it's no different from hitting a stone with an egg. If you use this matter to get my father's help and use his guilt, your chances of success will be greater. As long as you still need my father, even if I say it for 10 days and 10 nights, don't say one more word. Do you dare to kill me to silence me? I'm asking if you dare. Mr. Cuckold choked on his wife's words. His red eyes surged with complex and vicious emotions. After a while, you don't dare? The lady sneered, and raised her hand to straighten her clothes. She walked past him with her head held high and chest puffed out, leaving 2 words behind. Coward. The lady was right. Mr. Cuckold indeed needed his father-in-law's help. Now was not the time to fall out with the Yu family. When he succeeded, he wouldn't have to continue enduring that shrew's humiliation. Madame and Madame Zhou quickly reached a tacit understanding. While Nieqing was forcing Zheng Hao to jump up and down, they quickly acted and interrupted the rhythm of the internal fight. Madame and Madame Zhou were originally attached to the Nie family. The Nie family didn't have their guards up against them, and even gave them a certain amount of trust. No one expected that the former dogs would suddenly bite back. Zheng Hao was the most surprised that Madame and Madame Zhou joined the civil war. Even though he had acted first and tricked Nieqing into taking 2 cities, Nieqing had reacted and taken an effective counterattack. Zheng Hao's foundation was still weak. Even with Qiguan Rang and the others secretly supporting him, he couldn't compete with Nieqing. He was almost beaten to a pulp. Madame and Madame Zhou joined the internal fight. Nieqing's backyard was on fire. Zheng Hao's pressure on the front lines decreased. Not only did he catch his breath, but he also forced Nieqing, who was at his peak, into a difficult situation. Qiguan Rang and the others surrounded the fire to watch the show. They were in a particularly good mood. They planned to add bricks and tiles to the fire that had been ignited with great difficulty. Nieqing and the others keenly sensed that something was wrong. They didn't want to be dragged into the swamp of the internal fight. However, Zheng Hao's greed and Madame Zhou's ambitions wouldn't give up so easily. The more Nieqing considered the bigger picture, the more fearless they became. In the end, they really fought. Nieqing understood that according to this rhythm, they would either die from the internal fight between the 3 families or Jiang Pengji would take advantage of them. After thinking about it, Nieqing chose the latter. Jiang Pengji was an external threat. Zheng Hao, Madame Zhou, and Madame were internal threats. Nieqing didn't think he had done anything wrong to them. However, they betrayed the Nie family at their most difficult time and made a counterattack. If he didn't kill these ungrateful people, was he supposed to keep them alive for the new year? Nieqing didn't want to see his father in the underworld one day and be reprimanded by him for not being able to control his henchmen. Nieqing was serious. The internal fight became even more intense. Apart from a truce on New Year's Day, there was no end to the fighting. At first, only a few families participated in the war. Later, other forces were involved. The situation was chaotic. Looking at Zhongzhou, Nansheng, and Dongqing, only Jiang Pengji and Shui were celebrating. Chapter 1643. Jiang Pengji had been in the north for more than a decade. She celebrated the new year according to the customs of the north. This was the first time she had returned to the south. The new year in the south was very different, not only in terms of customs, but also in the environment. The snow in the north had always been thick, but it was not too cold around the new year. It was different in the south. The snow was not thick, but the air was chilly. It was during the war, so the atmosphere was not strong. The streets and alleys were almost empty. Half a month before the new year, Jiang Pengji led people to visit everywhere secretly. She was only relieved when she was sure that the people had been properly settled down. There were many people in the world who obeyed on the surface, but disobeyed on the inside. That was why there were scandals of poor supervision and poor implementation. It was not possible even in the future interstellar with the information explosion, let alone in ancient times when communication was extremely inconvenient. The people under her command did not take the people seriously, nor did they take her orders seriously. It was normal for the winter clothes and food to be embezzled and embezzled. Therefore, Jiang Pengji's hand was stained with blood during this trip. She killed along the way, so the local officials spent the new year in fear. They were afraid that Jiang Pengji was secretly watching them. Who knew where she came from? Those who committed lesser crimes were reprimanded from top to bottom. None of the people involved could escape. Those who committed more serious crimes and embezzled more than the standards set by Jiang Pengji were merciful. Of course, it was not that she did not promote people along the way. Corrupt people were hateful and deserved to be killed, but those who did their duty well and even exceeded their quota should be rewarded and encouraged. She recorded the people and things she saw along the way in her mind's account book. Some people should be promoted. It was a waste of talent to stay in their original positions. Some people did not have enough experience. They needed to be honed for a year or two before being promoted. Some people were not as good as the top, but were better than the bottom. Rewards were enough. The snow outside is melting. Why is my lord dressed so lightly? Wei Xiai did not follow Jiang Pengji everywhere. He stayed to deal with the trifles of a new year. Even if he wanted to follow, Jiang Pengji would not allow it. After all, Wei Xiai did not have a strong body like hers. If he ran around for a month in the cold season, he would definitely fall ill. I'm not afraid of the cold. Jiang Pengji untied the rope of her straw cape with one hand and threw the name list on the bamboo slip to Wei Xiai. The paper was light, but it had its drawbacks. If it got soaked in the rain, the ink would scatter. For convenience, Jiang Pengji used a bamboo slip to record and a penknife to carve. Even if the bamboo slip was damp, the words on it could still be preserved for a long time. It was enough for her to bring it back for Wei Xiai and the rest to copy. Wei Xiai opened the bamboo slip. The first dozen or so names were all killed by the Lord, and each name was followed by the crime of being killed. The 20 or so names in the middle were reprimanded or demoted, and the last 10 or so names were praised or promoted. Remember the people behind you for this year's new year. Yes, sir, the files of those who were punished or killed are still on the way. It's a long journey, so it'll probably take 2 days to get there. Jiang Pengji smiled and said, in order to come back as soon as possible to spend the new year with you, I've shortened the journey time again. Do you feel touched? Wei Xiai sighed. I want to be touched, but there are too many things to do this year. I have the heart, but not the strength. Every new year, important officials would receive generous rewards. It was a kind of year-end bonus. Officials who had worked hard and performed well in the previous year would also receive it. Other than the important officials, who were personally reviewed by Jiang Pengji, the rest were arranged by her subordinates. In the past, Dongqing, which was a fraction of the later, had a small territory and few officials. It was naturally relaxed during the new year. Now that it controlled Dongqing, the northern borderline, and Nansheng, it had expanded in scale. The New Year's gifts had to be prepared long in advance and sent to various places. In her previous life, Her Majesty did not start this habit until she ascended the throne. From her ascension to the throne until the year of Long Yubin, it had lasted for a whole 18 years. No matter how fierce the battle in the court was, the lower levels of officialdom were still relatively clean. Now it had started early. There was Wei Xi's admonition and the enlightenment of the idle people. Even if it was an insignificant year-end bonus, the person who received the reward would be greatly encouraged. At the same time, it could also be used as a warning to those who did not receive the gifts. The types of gifts were relatively simple, such as a set of ink, a knife of paper, a piece of cloth. It didn't matter if there were too many or too few gifts, or if the gifts were too light or too heavy. What mattered was the meaning behind the gifts. This was not only to win over the hearts of the people, but it was also a warning to the many supervising officials. It was to make them constantly alert and not slack off, especially when they knew that Jiang Pengji would spend a month at the end of the year inspecting the grassroots. They did not dare to be careless. To be able to receive a gift meant that they had done well in the previous year. This killer was very satisfied, and they did not have to worry about losing their lives during the new year. As for those who did not receive it, they were naturally trembling with fear, afraid that disaster would befall them one day. After so many years, except for Nansheng and Nansheng who did not know the rules, everyone in Dongqing understood her temperament. Towards those who were derelict in their duties and corruption, she would kill them without batting an eyelid. As long as they were dutiful and diligent in their duties, she was also a magnanimous and benevolent ruler. Every new year, the people would be surprised to find that these parents and officials became extraordinarily hardworking. Their performance in government affairs rose steadily, and their efficiency was extremely high. For example, among the New Year's letters sent this year, there was a very interesting content. A small county magistrate who was mediocre but had been in a remote and desolate village for 23 years complained that his old mother was getting on in years. She happened to hear about foreign chong peaches and really wanted to eat them. Even if she could not eat them, it would be good to see them. He also wanted to buy half a caddy for his old mother. But the small county in the 81st level didn't have it, and the price of buying it on behalf of others was too expensive. Jiang Pingji felt that this request was not too much. This minor official's performance in the previous year was not bad, and he had a good reputation in the local area. Therefore, the New Year's gift was changed from a knife of paper and 2 ingots of ink to a caddy of peeled chong peaches. Not to mention how frightened and surprised the minor official would be when he received the chong peaches. Jiang Pengji was busy until the morning of New Year's Eve before she stopped writing. There were wars everywhere this year. During the winter, she even allocated funds to save millions of people in Jinan and Nanshan. If it was not for the fact that the Nan family had assassinated 7 noble families in Fenzhou and enriched their private coffers, her wallet would have been empty. The New Year's banquet was not as elaborate and grand as the previous years. It was more like an ordinary family banquet. Everyone gathered for a meal and summarized their performance in the previous year. Compared to her low-key side, and Shui on the other side was very arrogant. Hua Yuan could hear in Shui's laughter from afar. He adjusted the expression on his face and revealed just the right amount of puzzlement. He smiled and entered the main tent. I wonder what happy event has made my lord so happy. The bashful Xichang princess was kneeling next to Shui. His large palm held the princess's soft hand, and he kept rubbing it with emotion. The heavens have not ended my heir. And Shui's eyes reddened as he spoke. Although he said that the princess of Xichang was just a plaything and did not have the right to give birth to a young master for him, he was still very happy that she was really pregnant. Chapter 1644. Congratulations, my lord. Congratulations, my lord. Hua Yuan bowed with his hands folded. His sincere expression darkened the Xichang imperial concubine's eyes. She grew even more wary. She subconsciously rubbed her flat belly and couldn't help but sigh. She was both happy and sad. She was happy that she was pregnant. Her treatment would be several levels higher. No matter how much Shui looked down on her, he would not mistreat the child in her belly. She was sad that she was the imperial concubine of a nation. The first half of her life had been doted on by her father and mother. She had enjoyed all the riches in the world. But in the second half of her life, her country had fallen. She was homeless and had even been treated as a slave by a small feudal lord. She had no control over her children. She had once despised the women in the harem who used their beauty to please men. She had never thought she would be worse than them. The Xichang imperial concubine was not old, but she was very shrewd. Even though she was filled with sorrow, she still wore a gentle and elegant smile on her face. She knelt behind Shui. Those who did not know would think she was Shui's legal wife. Hua Yuan's congratulations were very ordinary, but Shui beamed. He valued Hua Yuan even more now. I should be the one thanking you. That divine doctor is skilled and virtuous. He is truly a divine physician. And Shui couldn't help but grab Hua Yuan's hand. He patted it as he sighed. Perhaps because he had resolved the matter, he looked radiant. He seemed several years younger. Hua Qing, you have to thank that divine doctor for me. When Lin is born, he will reward you greatly. If not for Hua Yuan's recommendation, Shui would not have been able to cure his illness and have his own child. In terms of merit, the Xichang imperial concubine who had given birth was only second. Hua Yuan was without a doubt the first. Yes, only the heavens knew what kind of willpower Hua Yuan had to deal with Shui without batting an eyelid. He wanted to tell the unlucky Shui that he could not give him the merit. After all, it was the Xichang prince who had worked hard. After Hua Yuan left, Shui reminded the Xichang imperial concubine again. The child is still young. You have to take care of yourself. When Lin is born, you will not be treated unfairly. The imperial concubine felt very disgusted, but she had to show a shy and happy smile. I understand. I will definitely give birth to a healthy child for you. And Shui was very satisfied. He planned to spread this news so that everyone would feel happy as well. The news of Xichang's princess concubine's pregnancy quickly spread. The officials all congratulated her, and she was so happy that she could only see her teeth but not her eyes. This new year was the most comfortable new year since the disaster of the southern barbarians. Apart from a select few, the other officials did not know that Shui had an unmentionable illness. Those in the know included the old officials who had fought alongside Shui in the early years, such as the Target brothers he had sworn to when he was a member of the Red Lotus group in Dongqing. Speaking of these two sworn brothers, he sighed. Shui had been able to call them brothers when he was down and out. Later on, when he returned to Nansheng and started his own business, the aristocratic ways in his bones had completely separated him from his two sworn brothers. The two sworn brothers had martial prowess and were not afraid of death. In the early years, when Shui had no men and no land, they were indeed the trump cards that Shui could bring out. The present was different from the past. Was Shui still the stray dog of the past? He was now the vassal of Nansheng and Shui. The two sworn brothers were born in the wilderness and were illiterate. They spoke rudely and acted rashly. And Shui, on the other hand, was a famous aristocrat who had enjoyed all the glory, splendor, and wealth. The three of them did not grow up in the same environment at all. They did not share the same view of the world. However, Shui did not want others to say that he was an ingrate who shared hardships but did not share hardships. Even though the two sworn brothers had fallen behind for many years, he did not abandon them. Instead, he gave them a place to retire and allowed them to live a life where they did not have to worry about food and water. Shui felt that he had done his best, but the two sworn brothers did not feel good about it. They thought that they were very important, but as Shui climbed to a high position, or as he recovered the glory that he once had, they seemed out of place. They had been marginalized by Shui all these years. One of them had even been demoted again and again because he did not do a good job in supervising the rations. Now, he was just a bald general. Calling him a general was just a nice way to put it. In reality, he was not even as good as an ordinary centurion. Shui was overjoyed. They only had the right to be in the background because of their past hardships. When the crowd of congratulatory people had left, the two sworn brothers finally had a chance to say a few words to Shui. One of them was more straightforward. With a hesitant expression, he said, "Big brother, isn't your body? Why does sister-in-law have?" Before he could finish, Shui's face turned completely black. The other sworn brother interrupted him with an awkward smile. "Congratulations, big brother. When sister-in-law is pregnant, I will congratulate big brother again. I suddenly remembered that I still have things to do in the camp. I will take my leave first." With that, he dragged his sworn brother away without a word. If he did not leave, did he want to be killed by Shui in a rage? Did he not see that Shui's face was so black that it was almost green? Men could not stand the humiliation of being cuckolded, much less being questioned by a sworn brother. "My good brother, why are you dragging me away? If I don't drag you away, do you want to drag me to death? How did I drag you down?" Big brother obviously cured his body, and that's why sister-in-law is pregnant. Yet you're questioning whether his hidden illness has been cured. Aren't you suspecting that the baby in sister-in-law's womb belongs to another man? He was almost at his wit's end. After so many years, did he still not know how to be more cautious? As they followed Shui, they became more aware of what it meant to be powerless. It wasn't that they were not brave enough when it came to killing their enemies. It was just that brute strength did not allow one to climb higher in this world. To make an analogy, when Shui had just started his business, of course, he prioritized profits. He rushed for sales and income. It was fine for his subordinates to be a group of undergraduates. But when his business expanded and he wanted to expand his business, it was inevitable that he would choose to transform and pay more attention to product quality and the capabilities of the company's personnel. The two sworn brothers were undergraduates. If they wanted to keep up with the pace and not be eliminated, they had to work hard to enrich themselves. They had to work hard to make their abilities catch up with the elites from prestigious universities. Otherwise, what awaited them was elimination. Speaking of which, Dian Yin, who worked under Jiang Pengji, was a typical example. He was a hard-working person who kept learning and kept up with the pace. Dian Yin was lucky. Jiang Pengji, the Lord, gave him directions at the right time. Yangtze, the think tank, was stationed with him in Hu County for 2 to 3 years and gave him special lessons from time to time. Dian Yin learned with difficulty at first, but he also climbed up after much hardship. On the other hand, the two of them were not so lucky, and Shui did not have the patience. He did not think that their hard work would be very effective. His other colleagues also looked down on their background and abilities. They were unwilling to pay attention to these two uncouth people, let alone give them pointers. They could still stay in the Shui group as a customer service and janitor. They could earn a living because of Shui's kindness. Chapter 1645. Actually, for the two of them, being a customer service, security guard, or a janitor was nothing. No matter what, it was better than squatting in a village and showing off their strength to survive. However, it was difficult to balance it out, and Shui used to be attentive and concerned to them, calling them brothers and thinking highly of them. But now, he didn't need them anymore. From being in Shui's right and left arms and confidants, they were reduced to the background, idlers who did chores. This wasn't the worst part. The worst part was that the people who used to suck up to them were now stepping on them. Their days were getting more and more depressing. With such a huge difference, it would be strange if they felt good. But they couldn't complain, lest Shui heard about it. They only had a little bit of friendship left with Shui. If they lost even this, they would probably be beaten back to their original state. Sigh, let's not talk about these unhappy things. We haven't had a drink together in a long time. He patted the shoulder of his brother and sighed. Sister-in-law warmed the food and wine at home. We're going to drink to our heart's content tonight. Let's go. Both of them were sad people, so they agreed to get drunk together. Unexpectedly, they ran into Lu Zheng, who had lost a lot of weight and was about to return home. The brothers' eyes brightened. One of them called out to Lu Zheng. Military advisor Lu, where are you going? Lu Zheng's situation wasn't much better than the two brothers. The latter saw it and remembered it. Lu Zheng had sacrificed a lot for Shui. The first 2 years were even more difficult. Who knew how much energy and effort it took to slowly open Shui's shop, allowing him to enjoy the glory he had today. Now that Hua Yuan, who was more to Shui's liking, had appeared, Lu Zheng, the strategist with whom he didn't share the same values, was slowly buried and marginalized. To be honest, Lu Zheng was one of the few people in Shui's camp who was willing to look the two brothers in the eye. Thus, they were extremely respectful to Lu Zheng. They would greet him and say a few words when they met on the road. Lu Zheng turned his head and said calmly, "So, it's you two generals. I want to congratulate my lord earlier. I'm on my way home to stay up for the new year." Even though there weren't many people in Lu Zheng's house, staying up for the new year was an old tradition. The two brothers looked at each other, cupped their fists, and invited, "We are also alone outside, and it's boring to stay up all year round. Why don't you join us, military advisor?" Lu Zheng nodded in agreement. Festivals like the Chinese New Year should have some popularity, and the more people, the merrier. The two brothers happily led the way. After a few turns, they arrived home. The house was brightly lit, and a beautiful woman had been waiting outside for a long time. "Madam, go and prepare some good wine and dishes. We must drink to our heart's content with the military counselor and the others tonight." The woman nodded and led the two maids to bring out the wine and delicacies that had been kept warm. After eating 2 mouthfuls of food, her sworn brother said, "Sister-in-law's cooking is amazing. I haven't had such delicious food in a long time." The two brothers boasted about their business. Lu Zheng sat at the side and listened quietly. He did not speak for a long time. He had met that madam once. It was said that she was originally the wife of a small aristocratic family. Because of the chaos of the war, she was separated from her family when they migrated. She fell into the hands of the southern barbarians and was tied to the back of a horse as a spoil of war. Whether it was luck or misfortune, the southern barbarians were about to take their spoils of war away to enjoy when they ran into the troops of Shui's tent. At that time, and Shui's career had just started. The two sworn brothers were the most useful generals under his tent. The sworn brother killed the southern barbarian bandits and saved this concubine's daughter. He immediately saw her and brought her back to his tent without a word. From Lu Zhang's point of view, this kind of forced buying and selling was essentially no different from the southern barbarian bandits. Weren't they all bandits? But this madam had accepted her fate, so Lu Zhang could not say anything. He had not liked this world. Whether it was men or women, they were all pitiful and weak in the face of evil bandits who took things by force. In the end, they had to accept their fate and treat the other party as heaven and earth. It was truly laughable. Lu Zhang was not a talkative person, so the two brothers did not think there was anything wrong with him. After 3 rounds of wine, their faces were red, and they began to speak with a lisp. Their voices sounded slurred, and they did not control their mouths. Lu Zhang listened and sighed inwardly. No wonder Shui was at odds with these two brothers. Secrets could not be kept. Once they drank, they dared to say anything. As time went on, a narrow-minded person like Shui would naturally have disagreements. The two were discussing Shui's inability to have children due to her unmentionable illness, each saying something about how the other had gotten pregnant. Not only did Shui disagree with them, but Lu Zhang also felt uncomfortable listening to them. If the salted fishes were here, they would know why. Because the words of these two brothers were stabbing straight at the G-spot of a straight man. It would be strange if Lu Zhang, who had normal values, could feel comfortable listening to them. After listening for a while, Lu Zhang used the excuse of sobering up to go out to the veranda to look at the snow. The sounds in the room faded away behind him. It's snowing. The bright moon poured down cold light, dispersing the tipsiness on Lu Zhang's body. His swollen mind calmed down again. He had a question in his heart. This question was the same as the two people in the room. How did Shui have a child? How did the child come so coincidentally? Seeing Shui so happy all day, it did not seem fake. Although he was confused, he did not say it out loud like a bore. Lu Zhang still cherished his life. If he angered Shui's murderous intent because of this, wouldn't he die an unjust death? No matter how imaginative he was, he did not expect Hua Yuan to play such a trick. On the surface, he was plotting for Shui, but behind his back, he wanted to kill Shui. Moreover, he did not expect Hua Yuan to arrange for the sewing opportunity to be the elder brother of the Xichang princess. Those with more upright thoughts would not immediately think of something that went against human relations, unless it was someone as observant as Jiang Pengji or someone as schizophrenic as Hua Yuan. As he thought about it, Lu Zhang heard the crunching sound of wooden clogs stepping on the snow. A delicate fragrance wafted into his nose. "Sir," a gentle female voice carried a watery warmth. The lady walked over gracefully and put down a cup of soup to sober up. Lu Zhang declined politely. "I haven't had much to drink, so I won't trouble you." He was not a single person. He could understand women's hints. When dealing with married women, it was right to keep a respectful distance. "Sir, don't be nervous. Lang Jun and third brother are drinking in the room. The two of them are drunk and don't know what's going on here." The lady laughed. Seeing that Lu Zhang was still keeping a respectful distance, she said warmly, "Sir, please don't misunderstand me." The lady secretly looked around the room. Suddenly, she poured the warm soup on Lu Zhang. She raised her voice and kept apologizing to Lu Zhang. Lu Zhang's face darkened. He raised his hand and brushed away the lady's action of wiping him with a handkerchief. He looked angry. "I'm sorry. There are still clothes to change in the residence. Why don't you come to the guest house and change? I'll arrange for a servant to send you away." Lu Zhang did not say anything. He closed his eyes and hid his thoughts. Chapter 1646. What does Madam want to do? Just say it. Why beat around the bush and arouse suspicion? Several guesses floated through Lu Zhang's mind during the short distance from the main yard to the guest yard. Finally, he was sure that she wanted something from him. Lu Zhang didn't think that a woman he had only met once or twice would fall in love with him, especially since this madam had experienced too much. But she was still living peacefully. Naturally, she was an intelligent woman with a sharp mind. She couldn't be unaware of her husband's temperament, and Shui's two sworn brothers were boorish men who were illiterate to begin with. They had all the strength in their bodies, but not the slightest literary knowledge. To put it bluntly, they were bandits who didn't know what etiquette was. The worst side of men was vividly displayed in them. Whenever they saw a good-looking married woman, they would forcefully take her, never thinking that their behavior was wrong. Their logic was also quite interesting. Because the married woman was the spoils of war of the southern barbarians, they had saved this spoils of war from the southern barbarians. Therefore, they had the right to decide the spoils of war. Whether they forcefully took her or bestowed it to someone else, it was a matter of course. Lu Zheng thought that this logic was wrong, but it was precisely the law of chaotic times. The strong had the right to freely distribute resources. Ants didn't have the right to be free. However, although they were ants, they also had the right to struggle. As soon as Lu Zheng finished speaking, the two entered the guest yard. The madam turned around and bowed to him. "Madam, are you forcing me?" Was she trying to force a duck onto a perch? Or was this moral coercion? "I do have a request, but I have no intention of forcing you." Lu Zheng frowned slightly. He wasn't afraid of trouble, but he wouldn't accept anyone's trouble. It wasn't like he was overflowing with kindness and had nowhere to vent it. "Madam, why don't you tell me first? If I can help, I will naturally help. If not, you don't have to make this trip." Lu Zheng didn't say anything definite, which could be considered as giving her a glimmer of hope. She waved her hand at the door that separated the outer and inner rooms of the guest courtyard. The simple door was opened, revealing a shy face. Lu Zheng furrowed his brows and took a look. With his sharp eyes, he discovered that the handsome manservant with a red face and white teeth was a girl. She was not tall, and her body was very skinny. Only her face was extremely beautiful. If she was properly nourished and her facial features developed, she would definitely be a beauty that could topple cities. "Madam, this is... Come here, quickly greet the teacher." The madam waved at the child and pulled him. "To tell you the truth, this child was born from my late husband and me." Back then, during the disaster of the southern barbarians, my late husband's family migrated, but they encountered an accident and unfortunately died. In order to avoid disaster, this servant had no choice but to hide the child and lead the southern barbarian bandits away by myself. Later I met this person. This servant then brought the child back. It's just that he's a very hot-tempered person. Whenever there's even the slightest sign of trouble, he'll get angry. Your servant had no choice but to lie and say that the child is my niece's son. In order to keep the blood of her mother's family, she wanted to keep them by her side so that they could eat. In the past few years, she was fine, but as the child grew older, her face became like this servant's. Recently, it has become even more so. Therefore, I had no choice but to find a way out for her. Lu Zheng was very smart. He knew what the madam had encountered the moment he heard this. A trace of disgust flashed in the depths of his eyes. According to the madam, when her husband had just met with misfortune in the morning, she had been abducted by the southern barbarians. Halfway through, she had been rescued by Shui's sworn brother, who had forcefully brought her back to his tent. In the face of these encounters, she had persevered and survived to raise her daughter. She had never expected that her daughter's appearance, which had inherited her and her late husband's merits, was even better than her own. As she grew older, Shui's sworn brother had actually taken a liking to her. "How old is she?" The madam said. "She's already in her golden years." 12. Lu Zheng was very shocked. The skinny girl in front of him looked at most 9 or 10 years old. Looking at her skinny appearance, her eyes seemed especially large, and her hair was yellow and sparse. However, beauty was in her bones, not in her skin. Even so, she was still outstanding. The madam smiled bitterly and said, 2 years ago, when he saw this child, he had designs on her. However, he was too young and immature, so he didn't make a move. My late husband only had this little bit of flesh and blood left. How could he make her come this far? For the past 2 years, he could only think of ways to treat her harshly. She lacked clothes and food. If not for his reluctance, he might have even disfigured her. Mother and daughter are connected by heart. How could I have wanted this? Lu Zhang said, What do you plan to do? The madam said, Please take her, sir. Lu Zhang almost choked on his own saliva. The madam's words were too ambiguous. The madam also knew that she had said something wrong. She explained, I know that sir already has a family. If you're interested, you can take her as a concubine. If you're kind, you can take her as your adopted daughter. In the future, her marriage will depend on her luck. She won't be a hindrance to sir. Lu Zhang said, Madam, you really think highly of me. The madam said, After seeing that beast's evil heart, no matter how bad sir is, he's still better than him. The more time passed, the more flustered she became. Today, Lu Zhang came to visit, so she couldn't care so much. If she missed Lu Zhang, her daughter's future would really be ruined. Lu Zhang thought about it again and finally agreed to help. He took the opportunity when In Chui's sworn brother was drunk to say that he had his eyes on one of the servants in his residence and wanted to take one. In this era, giving each other concubines was a good thing to say, let alone taking a servant. The other party was very drunk and agreed in a daze. When Lu Zhang left, the girl turned to look at the madam, but the corners of her eyes were filled with doubt and hatred. What's your name? Lu Zhang threw his cloak to her to protect her from the wind and cold. This servant's surname is Kong, and my nickname is Shinto. Lu Zhang asked, Do you know your mother's intentions? He noticed that the girl's straw sandals were broken, and her exposed toes were blue from the cold. Her hands were also frostbitten, and her little face was purple from the wind. As intelligent as he was, he naturally saw the hatred in the girl's eyes. It also made him feel frightened. That hatred was about to materialize. The girl was silent for a long time, as if she didn't know how to answer this question. After a while, she said, This servant thought she was afraid that this servant would steal her husband, so she abused me in every possible way. Now, with just a few words, she has become a virtuous and loving mother. Forgive this servant for not being able to agree. Lu Zhang listened to the girl's eloquent words, which were completely different from her previous timid appearance. It was an eye-opener for him. This wasn't a timid cub with sharp claws hidden under its meaty pads. Then do you think that she sent you to me to stop you from stealing her favor? She harshly abused me every day, but now she says it's for my own good. Is there such a good thing in the world? The girl said, After father died, I didn't see her grieve for a single day. On that day, she went to another man's bed. This servant doesn't know? Is this considered a good wife and mother? Lu Zhang shook his head. Chapter 1647. It's reasonable for you to think that way. Lu Zhang didn't blame Kong Shinto. She was just a child who enjoyed her parents' love at a young age, but lost her loved ones overnight and couldn't understand her mother's pain. A child's thinking was different from an adult's. Adults could drag out an ignoble existence for a living, but a child's world was either black or white. The concept of gray had never existed. Lu Zhang was also a father, so he was naturally more tolerant and patient with children. The girl clenched her fists and gritted her teeth. Sir, do you mean that you believe her flowery words? She felt that her mother was ridiculous. When her father was still alive, he let her live a life of luxury. Outsiders often envied the couple. But what happened in the end? Less than a day after her father's death, she climbed onto another man's bed and nestled in his arms. She was like a parasite that could only cling to men and couldn't survive without a man. She didn't care about her ex-husband's daughter at all. In order to please her current husband, she even abused the girl in every possible way. She didn't have enough to eat or wear, and she was forced to wash buckets by the stream in the dead of winter. Rome wasn't built in a day. Similarly, the young girl's hatred towards her mother was not something that could be accumulated in 1 or 2 days, or even 1 or 2 incidents. Lu Zhang didn't answer and asked instead, Do you know what a person wants in a chaotic world? To live. The girl didn't understand. Lu Zhang continued, Living is not difficult for ordinary women. If they are willing to let go of their dignity, they don't mind being humiliated like dogs, and they don't mind living a muddle-headed life. Even if they fall into the hands of alien tribes, they can still survive. But living is easy. Living with dignity is difficult. No matter how you look at it, your mother is a smart woman. Kang Shintong still stubbornly insisted on her own opinion. Lu Zheng also lost the mood to go back and stay up for the new year. He stopped and took another path. He knew that the girl was stuck in a dead end. Simple chicken soup for the soul wouldn't wake her up. The best way was to slap her in the face with facts. Actually, your mother is your stepfather's concubine, not his legal wife. On the way to the destination, Lu Zheng first gave the rebellious girl a heads up to ensure that the effect would be the best. Your stepfather was born in the wilderness. He was originally a rebel of the Red Lotus group in Dongqing. He married a wife in the countryside of Dongqing. It's just that those rural women are like weeds. Their colors are not bright, and they are abandoned in their hometown early on. It was very common for a man to leave his wife behind in his hometown and look for a new lover on the outside. LV Zheng just wanted to tell the girl that a woman's face was indeed a weapon, but she couldn't use it as her most powerful weapon. Men covet color, but prefer freshness. Did you know that your stepfather had ill intentions towards you? I understand, Kang Shintong said stubbornly. Even if that old man took advantage of me, how bad can my ending be? To me, if I can borrow this face and become that man's concubine, I can live a better life. Who wouldn't I give myself to? Lu Zheng's footsteps halted. He turned around and looked down at her, a mocking smile on his face. Then I'll let you see an ending that's 10,000 times worse than being someone's slave. After saying this, LV Zheng grabbed Kang Shintong and walked a few steps forward. He had long legs and a long body, but Kang Shintong was small. She almost stumbled and fell. Her gaze fell on his hand that was pinching her wrist. LV Zheng didn't touch her hand directly, but through his wide sleeve. LV Zheng took her to the dark alley where the prostitutes gathered. He had never been to such a place before, but he had heard of it. He had seen it from afar when he was patrolling earlier, and the situation was terrible. Tonight was New Year's Eve. Logically speaking, every family should be celebrating the new year, but the dark alley was still lively. There were many low, dark doors in the alley, and women in dirty clothes leaned against the doors. Their ages ranged from 7 or 8 to 50 or 60. Most of these women were in a sorry state. Their cheeks were purplish red from the cold wind, and some of their faces were covered with poor quality makeup. Other than the stench of sweat and poor quality makeup, there was also an indescribable smell in the air. When Kang Shintong passed by one of the women's short doors, the stench was even stronger. It was like a corpse that had been left in the hot summer for 7 or 8 days and hadn't been cleaned up. Even a thick layer of makeup couldn't hide the rancid smell. The woman's feet were covered with straw sandals, and her exposed ankles were covered with fine white pustules. Some of the pustules were already broken, and some were red from the woman's scratches. Kang Shintong's little face turned pale. LV Zheng said, "Those leaning against the short doors are the prostitutes. These are still considered good. They can serve the guests and have a hut to shelter them from the wind and rain. Some of them just roll up a tattered mat and serve the guests in places with few people. Some of them are from good families, but most of them wander from place to place because of the persecution of the southern barbarians. Some of them were once the cheap concubines of rich families. Because of their old looks, they were despised and abandoned. They were sold to the broker house, and the broker house sold them to the brothel. The brothel has been receiving guests for 2 years, and they have changed from ordinary courtesans who receive 1 customer a day to the prostitutes who serve the peddlers. The number of customers they receive in a day is unknown, not to mention silver and copper. They can even give themselves to a night's rancid rice bran. Other than these women in the dark alley, there were naturally men who patronized them. Kang Shintong glanced at them and found that their eyes were all on her. She immediately felt so disgusted that her hair stood on end. She grabbed LV Zheng's sleeves and caught up with him in small steps. Only then could she have some sense of security. LV Zheng was wearing brocade clothes. One look and one could tell that he wasn't a lowly person. Even if he were to linger in the brothel, he would go to a high-end and exquisite brothel to find a young and beautiful prostitute. The manservant beside him didn't dress well, but he was extremely handsome with a red face and white teeth. Such a combination didn't look like people who would linger in the brothel. For a moment, they attracted a lot of attention. However, these hooligans didn't dare to have any ideas. Even if they did, it would depend on whether the sword on LV Zhang's waist agreed. LV Zhang took Kong Shintong to walk through the dark alley. Kong Shintong came in with a puzzled face and went out with a pale face. "You saw it all?" LV Zhang looked at Kong Shintong's head and said calmly, "Now what else do you want to say?" Kong Shintong suddenly felt disgusted. She grabbed LV Zhang's sleeves and turned her head to vomit out acid. Her mind was full of what she saw and heard just now. The house in the dark alley was very shabby. The movements inside the door couldn't be blocked by a door or a window. Because of the light, she couldn't see what was happening inside, but just listening to the movements made her shudder. The woman's heart-wrenching cries of pain and begging for mercy, the man's violent and heavy breathing and obscene words. Some houses were even more terrifying. There was only one woman in the house, but there was more than one man. Chapter 1648. She could not help but think of LV Zhang's previous words. It's easy to live, but it's hard to live with dignity. Kong Shintong did not dare to imagine that she would end up in such a situation many years later. After vomiting, she squatted down and wailed while hugging her knees, extremely resentful of her gender. Kong Shintong choked and said, "Sir, all women in the world are like this. They are born to suffer. Why do women still exist? It's better to die since birth." So what if her mother did it for her own good? Did her mother disregard her wishes and thoughts and force her to suffer so much for her own good? What she thought was good, could it be that it was really good? Why didn't she ask herself which was better, a dignified and painless death or a dignified but oppressive and violent life? Violence and torture in the name of love. Were they not abuse? LV Zhang interrupted her random thoughts at the right time. You have such messy thoughts because you have too little knowledge. It's just like how you only saw your mother's evil earlier. You don't know that all living beings suffer. Whether it's these women in the dark alley or other refugees who never have enough to eat, the most painful thing for them is not the torture inflicted on them, such as hunger and poverty. It's the endless torture that they can only be freed from until death. A person can't see the slightest bit of hope in life and can only live like a walking corpse. They don't even know why they're living, only knowing that they can live as long as they can. This kind of suffering without dignity is often more unbearable than physical torture. The common people could often endure physical torture, but they could not endure mental torture. The result of not being able to endure it was the idea of using death to escape like Kong Shintong. This was just going from a dead end to a dead end. What's the use of knowing more? Kong Shintong was, after all, a young girl who had just turned 12. Although her life was bumpy, she did not face the cruelest purgatory on earth. The world was still black and white. LV Zhang wanted to teach her what it meant to be gray. It's not that all women in the world are like this. It's just that the world is not stable. Anyone can fall into such a situation. LV Zhang said, "Using beauty to serve people is a shortcut, but not every shortcut can reach the same level." It was the same as using beauty to serve others, but there was also a difference in the target of serving others. If your target was your stepfather, the prostitutes in the dark alleys would most likely be the portrayal of the rest of your life. If your target was a noble with a high status and authority, or a hegemon who sat on the throne of the world, it would be a different situation. Isn't that because I'm inexperienced? Kong Shintong was speechless. After a while, she hung her head in embarrassment. I don't think I have that ability either. Kong Shintong knew that she had a good foundation and had inherited the best side of her biological parents. This could be seen from her stepfather's increasingly passionate and eccentric gaze these 2 years. Even though she was inexperienced, she knew what he was thinking. It was an undisguised, predatory look of a wild beast. Every time, her mother would panic and abuse her even more vigorously, which gave her an illusion. If that man was obedient to her, her mother would not dare to abuse her again. The repeated hints made her come up with this equation in her mind. Using her own body in exchange for power in the hands of a man, and using this to suppress her mother who bullied her, she could live a better life. Just as L.V. Zheng said, she was inexperienced, and her vision limited her imagination. The best choice she could think of was this, and the only target was her stepfather. Under such circumstances, how could she think that her beauty could attract someone who was more powerful than her stepfather? L.V. Zheng sighed and shook his head. Do you know who Lu Shi is? Kang Xintong shook her head. Even though Jiang Pengji was a famous and powerful feudal lord, not many people at the bottom of the hierarchy knew her. Dongqing was still all right. Jiang Pengji was quite well known. Many people knew the name of this feudal lord, where he was from, and whether he was a man or a woman. The people in Nansheng were more ignorant. It was good enough for them to know that there were other countries besides Nansheng, let alone feudal lords from other countries. They could not even maintain their lives, so how would they have the time to understand these things? Even if they wanted to, they had no corresponding channels. Lu Shi is a woman. Kang Xintong blinked in confusion and guessed. A stunning beauty? L.V. Zheng recalled the face of his childhood friend and shook his head to deny it. She was quite liked by the young ladies in Langyi County, but he had never heard of any man liking her. She had a nasty mouth and could not wait to gnash her teeth. On the contrary, Zi Xiao, who was known as the flower of Langyi County, was much more popular with men than that authentic woman. She is not a stunning beauty. It is true that she looks decent, but very few people pay attention to her face. Actually, no matter how ugly or beautiful she is, whether she is healthy or disabled, it is meaningless to her and the people around her. Kang Xintong asked, why is that? Because there are not many people in the world who are qualified to look directly at her face. When people bow down to her, they first see her feet and not her face. Kang Xintong asked again, is she the Empress? Empress? L.V. Zheng curled his lips mockingly. No matter how noble the Empress is, she still has to rely on her husband and her family. Once the country is destroyed, her husband no longer dotes on her, and her family abandons her. The Empress, who is second only to one and above tens of thousands of people, will also fall into a dark alley. How can she be compared to her? Kang Xintong could not understand who the Lu Shi that the teacher was talking about was. Lu Shi was a woman, but she had a more noble status than the Empress. Could she be the Empress? She asked timidly. The one who is more noble than the Empress is either the Empress or the deities in heaven. L.V. Zheng said, she is not the Empress. After all, she did not announce to the world that she was going to ascend to the throne, but she is not far from being an Empress in name only. A dynasty could be established in the land of Dongqing. Jiang Pengji, who occupied a territory larger than Dongqing, was naturally qualified to be the Empress. However, her ambition was obviously not something that Dongqing could accommodate. Nansheng was also the target that the tip of her sword pointed at. Kang Xintong's small mouth opened wide as she listened. Her small face was full of shock. The higher you go, the further you can see. Even if you can't reach her level, looking at her, you can remember one thing. A woman's appearance is neither a blessing nor a curse. It is just a part of her that is given by her parents and is born with. Even though she is a woman, she is not born to crawl on the ground. L.V. Zheng smiled and flicked her forehead. He said, as long as you stand at a higher position than others, your appearance will only be the capital that they praise you. On the other hand, you will be the prey that they covet. Just like your mother, she is just a prey. Kang Xintong's lips turned pale as she listened. Your mother is indeed at fault, but she sincerely hoped that you could live with dignity. It was rare for L.V. Zheng to have the patience to say so much. Even he himself was surprised. If Wei Ci was also a salted fish in the streaming room, he could only express his feelings by clicking 666. Chapter 1649. Prejudice and hatred were accumulated over a long period of time. Even if L.V. Zheng talked until his mouth was dry, Kang Shintong would not immediately understand her mother's painstaking efforts. However, she was willing to think from her mother's point of view with a fair attitude. This was already a great improvement. She could think about her mother's matters in the future. At the moment, Kang Shintong was more concerned about the matters in front of her, such as, "Teacher, do you also want me to be your concubine?" Children are different from adults. When adults mention these matters, most of them would conceal it because they knew that these matters could not be publicized. It was even shameful to talk about it aloud. Children, on the other hand, did not have so many concerns and were more frank. LV Zheng patted her forehead with his palm and clicked his tongue. "Silly girl, you're not even as tall as a human. Do you really think that you're as beautiful as a fairy? In this world, not every man is as lustful as your stepfather. If you were 18 or 19 years old and asked this question, I would be willing to think about it. But now, you have the appearance of an 8 or 9-year-old. Even slightly normal men would look down on you." Kang Shintong blushed and blurted out, "This servant is already 12 years old." LV Zheng rubbed the top of her head. "The wind is strong. Let's go back." "Yes." Kang Shintong could not help but bury her thin and flushed face into the cloak. The corners of her eyes were slightly red. LV Zheng's mansion was much larger than Kang Shintong's stepfather's, but it was also much simpler. Whether it was the main door or the main hall used to receive guests, there were no decorations. It was very simple. There were only a few carvings on the walls. It looked simple, but exuded comfort and elegance. On the other hand, Kang Shintong's stepfather could not wait to display all the gold and silver he won from the war outside to let outsiders see how rich his spoils of war were. Thinking of this, Kang Shintong could not help but let her imagination run wild. Teacher LV said that her mother was also a spoil of war. Then, her stepfather always liked to dress her up beautifully and let her attend the small gatherings of those gossipy madams. Was it also a kind of show-off? Showing off his spoils of war was a noble madam from an aristocratic family. She had good looks and self-restraint. There was nothing bad about her from head to toe. On the other hand, those madams were always dwarfed by her mother. "From tomorrow onwards, you shall live in the residence as my adopted daughter." Lu Zheng took the hand warmer from his servant. A burst of warmth drove away the coldness on his fingertips in a domineering manner. He said, "There is no third master in the mansion except for me and you. If there were any shortages, he could go straight to the housekeeper. Except for the old maids who do the cleaning, the servants in the mansion are basically men. You are a girl, so you should have a few maids to take care of your daily life. Tomorrow, I will ask the housekeeper to pick a few maids from the broker house. You can choose two to stay with you." Kang Shintong stood on the spot. Her hands covered in red and purple frostbites were so skinny that they looked like skin and bones. She clutched the sides of her clothes tightly. Why is Mr. so nice to me? She didn't suspect that LV Zheng had any bad intentions, but she didn't understand why LV Zheng was so good to her. It must be known that in this world, even if parents raise their children, their original intention was to continue the bloodline and continue the family line. People who were truly selfless were probably as rare as phoenix feathers and Qilin horns. Lu Zheng said, "There's no special reason. To be honest, it's probably because I've been bored recently." Kang Shintong was stunned. What kind of reason was this? Even if she didn't understand LV Zheng's identity, even her stepfather, who had a bad temper and couldn't be persuaded after he was drunk, was respectful to LV Zheng. It could be seen that LV Zheng should be an important person. Shouldn't an important person be busy with a myriad of affairs and have no leisure time? Lu Zheng said again, "Why do you care so much? It's not a bad thing for you anyway. You have nothing for others to plot against you." Kang Shintong said in embarrassment, "I overestimated myself. I made a fool of myself in front of Mr. LV Zheng asked the housekeeper to tidy up the guest courtyard for Kang Shintong to stay for the time being. Kang Shintong saw that he didn't leave and couldn't help but ask a few more questions out of curiosity. "Did Mr. say that you already have a family?" LV Zheng slowly blew on the freshly brewed tea to cool it down and poured a cup for her. Kang Shintong had led a hard life these years, but she was pampered and spoiled in the early years. The moment she sat down, her temperament couldn't be faked. It was obvious that she had received an excellent education. LV Zheng said casually, "Yes, but they're not here. It's too messy here. I'm worried." Kang Xintong let down her guard. She looked quiet, but her mouth loved to talk. She chattered nonstop. LV Zheng couldn't help but think of someone. Kang Xintong knew her limits. She didn't probe too much into LV Zheng's situation. Instead, she changed the topic to Jiang Pengji. Her hands clutched the teacup tightly, and she said softly, "Mister, can you tell me more about Lu Shi?" LV Zheng wasn't surprised. "She used to be my classmate." Kang Xintong's eyes were big to begin with. At that moment, her eyes widened even more because of her shock. "Classmate? But isn't she a girl? How could she be your classmate?" LV Zheng said. "She was disguised as a man by her father since she was young. She only came out in broad daylight many years ago." Are the bystanders blind? They can't tell that she's a girl. Kang Xintong had just finished speaking when she saw LV Zheng's indescribable gaze. She suddenly realized that she had said something wrong. She hurriedly tried to salvage the situation. "Mister, I didn't mean that you—" It's normal that they couldn't recognize her. After all, no girl would be like her. At that time, men were still very feminine. Jiang Pengji blended in very well with them. Little did they know that she was the dream girl of many young and ignorant gentry girls. LV Zheng seemed to have thought of something. His expression twisted for a moment. Even though he hadn't spent much time with Jiang Pengji, she had successfully left a nightmarish shadow in LV Zheng's heart. Even though he was hurt, LV Zheng didn't deny everything about Jiang Pengji. Lu Shi didn't have much of a reputation when he was young. I went to Hejian County to ask around. Most people only vaguely knew that there was such a Lang Jun. He lived in the inner residence for a long time. The teacher was a famous scholar in Dongqing, Wei Yuan. I couldn't find out more about him, LV Zheng said. He showed his talent at the age of 12. He trained the troops, cleared the bandits, and became Yuan Jing's disciple. After 3 years, Dongqing was in chaos. The 3 tribes of the northern borderline were aggressive. Lu Shi's sister was betrothed to the 4th prince of Dongqing, Wu Ma Jun. She represented her father, Lu Shi, to send her off. Not long after, she was put under house arrest in Shanjing. "House arrest?" Kang Xintong exclaimed. LV Zheng said. This involved a struggle between the 2 factions in the Dongqing court. The reason was more complicated. In order to stabilize his power, the Dongqing emperor ordered the gentry to send their descendants to Shanjing as hostages. If you're interested in it in the future, you can study it. Then how did she get out? LV Zheng said. I don't know what method she used to get out. Before I saw her move, there was an earthquake in Shanjing. The earthquake in Shanjing caused the royal family to move the capital. They abandoned the deserted capital and moved to Qinzhou. They also abandoned the people on that land. Chapter 1650. Starting from the lowly county magistrate of Xiangyang district, she led people to clean up the mess, quell the chaos of the Tsingyi army, then annihilate the Red Lotus group and unify the entire Wanzhou. Then came the alliance meeting at Huangshui. She joined forces with the alliance to fight against the fake emperor, Prince Changshou. She led troops into Chenzhou to rescue the emperor. Her identity as a woman was exposed in court. Not only did she not lose the position of magistrate of Wanzhou because of her gender, but she used her military power to force people to recognize her as the magistrate of Wanzhou. She entered Chongzhou and sent troops to the northern borderline. Step by step, from Xiangyang district to Wanzhou, then to the overlord of the entire north. The Su brothers lost their lives in Shanxing one after another. Huangsong suffered a crushing defeat, leaving behind a grudge in Changya. Zhanjiang Pass resisted Zhongzhao's Nielyang. Zhangzhou's naval forces defeated Yangtao. In just a few words, she described the situation of the world. Kang Xintong listened attentively. She clenched and relaxed her fists on her knees, completely ignoring the pain and itchiness of her frostbite. Lu Zheng didn't expect Jiang Pengji to do so many things over the years. She talked about them one by one until his mouth was dry. She lived a life that others couldn't even dream of in 10 lifetimes. Kong Shintong said, "She's the only one in the world. I'm afraid other women won't be able to reach her in their lifetimes. That's natural. If every woman jumped up and down like Lu Shi, wishing for the world to be in chaos, how can the world be peaceful?" Lu Zheng didn't expect Kong Shintong to become the second Jiang Pingji. She couldn't do that. But don't limit your vision to stepfather. If you really want to climb higher, then set your sights higher. For example, Lu Shi. She couldn't become the second Jiang Pingji, but she could become the best version of herself. Kong Shintong hadn't met Jiang Pingji yet, but the latter had left the deepest and most colorful stroke in her heart. Her impression was deeper than anyone else's. If Wei Ci found out that Kong Shintong had been recommended by Lu Zheng and made the future Red Lotus Saintess Jiang Pingji's fan, this recommendation was too vicious. Perhaps Shui would also doubt his life. Was Lu Zheng his advisor or a spy Jiang Pingji planted by his side? He didn't hear wrongly. The two malignant tumors that led the Red Lotus case that should have happened in the future had knelt. The world had just settled down, and His Majesty only had his eldest daughter, Jiang Yan. She had repeatedly wanted to make Jiang Yan the crown prince, but she was obstructed by various parties. On the surface, she was the imperial censor, but in reality, she was also interfered with by the scholars and the commoners. Everyone always said that His Majesty was still in the prime of his life and that he would live for 10,000 years in the future, so there was no hurry to appoint a crown prince. In fact, he was just stalling for time, hoping that Her Majesty would have another child, perhaps a boy. At that time, everyone would elect the prince as the heir apparent. Perhaps His Majesty would be persuaded. More than a year after the establishment of the Jiang dynasty, Her Majesty became pregnant again. The court seemed calm, but in fact, undercurrents were surging in the dark. All the forces had their own plans. Looking at it now, Wei Ci felt that Her Majesty was the one who was the most scheming, bullying her own subjects in various ways. When he was in the middle of a happy birthday, the remnants of the Red Lotus group rose from the ashes and even spread their teachings to the officials' back residences. Some people with ulterior motives had tried to use the Red Lotus group to harm Her Majesty and Jiang Yan. The Red Lotus group had also used them to open the door to infiltrate the palace and plan an assassination. The Red Lotus group was very good at picking the time. It happened to be the day when Her Majesty launched the happy birthday. Even though he later found out that this was all done on purpose by Her Majesty and that the whole situation was part of her plan to kill the disobedient people in the court, Wei Ci was still so scared that he broke out in a cold sweat. This religious assassination was also known as the Red Lotus case. The leader of the Red Lotus group was the grandson of Wu Liba, the sage of the northern borderline. Of course, this fish that had escaped the net was killed by Wei Ci in advance during the battle of the northern borderline. The other leader was the virgin of the Red Lotus group, a woman who used to go by the name of Kong Shintong. The remnants of the Red Lotus group were wiped out, and Kong Shintong was also caught. What shocked Wei Ci was that after this woman was caught, she almost escaped from prison. Someone helped her escape, and someone wanted her dead after careful investigation. In a sense, Kong Shintong was a little awesome. Her Majesty, who was sitting calmly on the fishing platform, ate melon seeds and watched the show. At the same time, she threw a thick file of information about Kong Shintong. Kong Shintong was born into a noble family in Nanshan. When she was young, she and her mother were captured by the southern barbarians and suffered a lot. Because her mother covered for her, Kong Shintong struggled to grow up to the age of 13. At the age of 13, her mother died, and her identity was exposed. In order to seek a better life for herself, she had no choice but to use her beauty to seduce the leader of the southern barbarians. With the help of the leader's power, she killed the barbarians who had once taken her. After 2 years of peace, Shui forced the southern barbarians into a desperate situation. Before he ordered a massacre, Kong Shintong disappeared. When she reappeared several years later, She became the Virgin of the Red Lotus Group, an underground cult. No one knew where Kong Shintong learned some treacherous sorcery and deceived the people. She began to infiltrate the inner residences of the officials and developed followers. Wu Liba's grandson ran the Red Lotus Group and propagated its teachings. Kong Shintong used these followers to attract more people to become her subjects. Some people joined the Red Lotus Group because of her beauty, while others joined because of the Red Lotus Group's secret power. Like a rolling snowball, the Red Lotus Group grew stronger in a short 2 or 3 years, forming a huge network of connections. Wei Ci still remembered Her Majesty's complaints. This child is so beautiful, but she ran off to engage in multi-level marketing. How stupid is she? How did Her Majesty find out about the Red Lotus Group? Although the Red Lotus Group had developed quite a lot, they were all operating in the dark. The court officials they had drawn in had also infiltrated from the periphery. They were very careful in their actions. Her Majesty was busy with court affairs. She had been expecting a happy birthday for the past few months. She did not have the energy to care about the Red Lotus Group. Facts had proven that Her Majesty was a little monster with exuberant energy. Her plans to plot against the Red Lotus Group and the restless aristocrats and commoners in the court began more than a year ago. "Do you still remember your birthday last year?" Wei Ci said. "I remember." Her Majesty said, "That day, when I went to the Spring Square to listen to Huan Yang sing, I saw Jing to go to the wine shop next door and get drunk." Although he looked confused, Wei Ci still listened carefully, trying to analyze the relationship between Fu Wang getting drunk and the Red Lotus Group. Jing Tu quarreled with his wife. Logically speaking, I should not interfere in the family affairs of the officials. But since I saw it, I have to ask about it. It would not be good if serious business was delayed because of family affairs. Her Majesty looked for excuses for gossip with a serious face. After asking carefully, I found out that Zheng Tu's subordinate had secretly presented him with a beauty. At the same time, many unspeakable rumors reached Zheng Tu's wife's ears. That wife was very angry and said that she was seeking death. Although Zheng Tu returned the beauty, his wife was still sad. Fu Wang's wife was naturally Hui Jun in this life. Although their experiences were different, they had the same ups and downs. In the end, she became Fu Wang's wife, which caused people to talk about for a while. Because of this, Fu Wang's wife was quite low-key and almost never appeared in public. The beauty presented by his subordinate was Kong Shintong. Fu Wang refused the temptation, but his wife closed the door in his face. After getting drunk, Fu Wang complained to Her Majesty that he had been cheated by an immortal. "That woman is beautiful, but my wife is not the slightest bit inferior. Am I, Fu Jingtu, the kind of person who forgets his wife when he sees love?" When Her Majesty heard this, he took it seriously. Fu Wang's wife was the first lady in terms of appearance. If she was not the slightest inferior to her, the effect of bribing Fu Wang would be greatly reduced. Her Majesty went back to investigate and found out that the Red Lotus Group was involved. Chapter 1651. What he said was true, but Wei Ci was not sure how true His Majesty's words were or how much he was joking. If it was in his previous life, Wei Ci would have believed it 100%. He wouldn't have dared to doubt it. In this life, the more he understood her, the more Wei Ci knew how deep her heart was hidden under her cynical appearance. He thought that Her Majesty's plan against the Red Lotus Group was probably earlier than what she said. She could see through people's hearts and control the overall situation. As her enemies, they often didn't even know how they were plotted against. To be honest, it wasn't clear whether the courtiers were lucky or unlucky to have met such an emperor. Whether she was a lord or an emperor, her scheming and strategizing didn't lose out to any counselor. She didn't lose out when it came to scheming and plotting against the entire court. Sometimes Wei Ci even imagined that if it wasn't for the fact that Her Majesty's energy was limited, she might be able to carry the entire chaotic world by herself. This could be seen from the court records after the establishment of the Jiang dynasty. As the banker, she would definitely win. As someone who boasted about Her Majesty and Her Majesty, Wei Si could boast about her even with his eyes closed. Wei Si was Jiang Pengji's fan leader and the chief instructor of the Internet Water Army. It was normal for him to boast about Jiang Pengji, but Lu Zheng was more confused. As in Shui's counselor, Lu Zheng had unintentionally helped Jiang Pengji sell several copies. In the end, he had even turned the future leader of the Red Lotus Group into a fan. That was a wonderful move. Of course, that wasn't the best part. The best part was that Kang Xintong was determined to treat Jiang Pengji as her idol for life. She wanted to be her only fan. LV Zheng smiled with relief. He was indeed Master Yuanjing's student. He was good at teaching and educating people. Wasn't this rebellious, and Shunibyu awakened by his strong medicine? It's good to have ambition, but you have to think clearly. No matter how high Lu she stands, or how far she goes, she's a rare existence among women. She can be a role model, but you can't be too obsessed with her success. The world treats women harshly. Maybe you've worked 10 times harder to be on par with a man who has worked twice as hard. It's far from the results you expected. Lu Zheng gave Kang Xintong a heads up to prevent her from falling behind. Even so, you won't change your mind? Kang Xintong was still young and couldn't fully understand Lu Zheng's words, but she could hear how serious and solemn he was. After careful consideration, Kang Xintong nodded heavily. She didn't expect to become as powerful as her idol, but she wanted to live with dignity. Kang Xintong wanted her mother to see what was the most dignified life for a woman. May I be so bold as to ask Mr. to show me the right path and teach me how to achieve my wish. Kang Xintong bowed to Lu Zheng without saying a word. Her slightly perplexed eyes were now filled with stubbornness and pleading. LV Zheng raised his hand and pressed her shoulder. She looked at him expectantly and cautiously. "Call me Godfather." His own child was still crawling, so Lu Zheng planned to adopt a foster daughter to satisfy his fatherly cravings. At the same time, he could also practice and learn how to be a qualified father. Hearing Lu Zheng's words, Kang Xintong instantly understood and called out, "Godfather." LV Zheng gladly agreed. Kang Xintong bowed again joyfully and said loudly, "Godfather, please accept a bow from your daughter." Coincidentally, the housekeeper had already tidied up the courtyard. LV Zheng arranged for Kang Xintong to rest. He planned to think about how to carve this unpolished jade into the best work of art. He was used to staying up late, so he was still full of energy the next day. Kang Xintong, on the other hand, was a little sleepy. Everything that happened yesterday was too dreamy. She couldn't fall asleep after lying down, afraid that it would be a dream when she woke up. LV Zheng didn't suspect anything and thought that the child was unfamiliar with the bed and wasn't used to it. On this end, the newly adopted father and daughter ate breakfast together, but they didn't know that Kang Xintong's mother suffered at the same time. Her snow-white skin was left with a pair of green and red fingerprints. 2 palm prints were very swollen, and her entire face was swollen. It was as if a perfect painting had been carelessly smeared by a naughty child, losing its beauty. The person who hit her was none other than Kang Xintong's stepfather. Her stepfather was drunk last night and promised to send Kang Xintong out in a daze. When he woke up the next day, he regretted it. He had secretly coveted Kang Xintong for 2 years and originally planned to bring her in after a year. Who knew that the fruit he had been looking forward to for 2 years would be taken away by LV Zheng? He respected LV Zheng and naturally didn't dare to blame him, but his anger had to be vented. Because of this, Kang Xintong's mother suffered. Although he was an illiterate, boorish man, he still had a meticulous side. With a little tidying up, he could guess who was behind this. Kang Xintong's mother was a woman he had doted on for several years. He was usually very satisfied with her, but who knew that this woman also had disloyalty? Kang Xintong had always been doing the lowliest menial work and didn't have the chance to come to the front yard, so her range of activity was limited. He didn't believe that if it wasn't for this woman's arrangement, Kang Xintong, who had always been imprisoned to do menial work, would have the chance to be taken away by LV Zheng in the front yard. In his anger, he slapped Kang Xintong's mother twice, causing her to see stars and her ears to hear the sound of a stream. Bitch, your jealous face is really hateful. He had a murderous look on his face, as if he could rush in front of her and strangle her to death in the next second. Kong Shintong's mother took a long time to recover. A bloody taste filled her mouth, and her molars were loose. Lang Jun, please forgive me. Why would I be jealous of my niece? She endured the nausea of the world spinning and crawled to his feet. She hugged his calf and begged, Lang Jun, you don't know. It was clearly that little bitch who heard that Master LV was a guest at your residence and had the thought of playing up to him. She put in a lot of effort to climb up to him. I'm really wronged. As she spoke, she cried as if it was really the case. The man's heart softened for a moment, but he still lifted his leg and kicked her away, leaving behind a sentence. Lock yourself in the backyard and reflect on yourself. If there's a next time, I'll cut off your head. He had been looking forward to it for 2 years, but in the end, it was all for nothing because of a woman's jealousy. He was depressed to death. The more unobtainable something was, the more people yearned for it. He deliberately sent people to LV Zhang's residence to find out the situation. It would be best if LV Zhang took Kong Shintong as a concubine. These days, it was considered elegant to treat guests as concubines and give each other concubines. He could use a young and beautiful girl to exchange for Kong Shintong. If one was not enough, then he would get a pair. He never thought that LV Zhang would really take Kong Shintong as his adopted daughter. This adopted daughter was not a godfather and goddaughter who hung a sheep's head and sold dog meat, but a real father and daughter. In other words, if he continued to covet Kong Shintong, he would covet LV Zhang's daughter. It was true that he cared about Kong Shintong, but he would not offend LV Zhang because of a little girl. He could only let this matter go. Chapter 1652. Jiang Pengji didn't know that Lu Zhang was diligently cultivating his loyal fans. After the new year, the originally relaxed atmosphere dissipated and was replaced by solemnity and tension. Since the assassination of the Nan family in Fenzhou, Jiang Pengji had changed so much that she was like a different person. At first, everyone was not used to it, but they got used to it after a while. Just as Wei Ci had said, their lord had grown up and become sensible. Because of Jiang Pengji's timely change, she accidentally extinguished the original hidden danger and avoided a potential crisis. As long as everyone was united, they were confident that they could tear the whole world apart, let alone in Shui. A few days after the new year, Jiang Pengji called for a meeting. The topic of the meeting was naturally how to get rid of Shui. Yes, Jiang Pengji was pure and unpretentious. She told everyone that she had suffered a loss at Shui's hands last year. If she didn't get back at him this year, she wouldn't be able to take it lying down. She didn't know what euphemism was. One could imagine how their lord's reputation would be if these words were recorded in the annals of history. Among everyone, only Wei Ci was worried for 3 seconds. Yang Si and the others had long given up on treatment. Whatever. Turning their heads. Not only Jiang Pengji, but the others were also rubbing their fists and getting ready to do something big. If there are no objections, it's decided for now. Jiang Pengji looked around and took in everyone's expressions. After waiting quietly for a while, she repeated her question. For now, we'll send troops to conquer Shui before the spring plowing. Does anyone have any other opinions? Regardless of whether it was Jiang Pengji or the others, most of them agreed to start the war before the spring plowing. Only a few wanted to wait until the spring plowing was over. Everyone had their own reasons. Jiang Pengji listened carefully to different voices and analyzed the pros and cons of each opinion. In the end, she decided to send troops before the spring plowing. Her decision didn't attract opposition from the officials. Instead, it caused the idle people to be puzzled. They hadn't been following the live stream for so many years for nothing. Naturally, they knew how important ancient farming was. Unless they had no other choice, both sides would wait until the spring plowing was over before starting the war. Spring plowing was too important to the ancient people who depended on the weather to make a living. Wasting a year's spring plowing was equivalent to a year's worth of food going down the drain. The probability of famine in the following year was greatly increased. Understanding this, They couldn't understand Jiang Pengji's choice. Guoli Guiduo. Isn't spring plowing very important? If I remember correctly, the host was in a tight spot last year. Under such circumstances, shouldn't she place more emphasis on this year's spring plowing? If we start the war before the spring plowing, it would affect not only the enemy, but also our side. In the salted people's eyes, this choice was no different from suicide. Common people do not benefit themselves, and both sides suffer. Tudu Faccio. I'm a little confused too. I don't understand why the host is taking such a risk. And seems to have the advantage, but after careful analysis, I feel that the host still has a large chance of winning. Couldn't they fight steadily and surely? Why do they have to use such a method? Guethis Jiang, 1, Jiang can Guekai Go Feng CEO. I seem to have guessed it. Host, is this related to Shui's fortification last year? Last year, in order to make things difficult for Jiang Pengji, Shui had deliberately given Nanxing and Sheng prefectures to her. On the surface, Jiang Pengji had the upper hand. She conquered the two prefectures without much effort, but she didn't know that 70 to 80% of the grains and young men in the two prefectures had been forcibly conscripted and gathered by Shui, and had the upper hand, leaving Jiang Pengji with two prefectures to deal with. She had to pay for nearly 1 million people's grains and winter supplies. She also had to prevent the local gentry in the two prefectures from taking the opportunity to cause trouble. Not only did it cost money, but it also took a lot of effort. What about Shui? He had a great winter. Not only did he have a bigger purse, but he also became a father. Gui Feng Xiao Long. Many people remembered when he mentioned this. However, what was the connection between Shui's fortification and Jiang Pengji's abandonment of spring plowing? Naturally, there was a connection. Jiang Pengji gave up the spring plowing to attack Shui. She only abandoned the spring plowing in Nanxing and Nanxing prefectures. The plowing in Dongqing and Beizhou, northern borderline, was not affected, but Shui could not. He plundered a lot of grains from the two prefectures last year, but the young men he took with him had to eat too. If the spring plowing could not keep up with the harvest this year, there would definitely be a food shortage. When an army went to war, a lack of food was almost equivalent to losing half of the war. If everything went smoothly, Shui would not last until this autumn. Jiang Pengji intended to end the war quickly. She wanted to take advantage of his weakness and kill him. After dealing with Shui, she would turn around and take care of Zhongzhou, speeding up the pace of unifying the world. While everyone was discussing the details, Jiang Pengji briefly explained her intentions to the salted fishes. Some salted fishes were stubborn. They felt that Jiang Pengji did not need to be so anxious. Steady attacks were the way to go. Some salted fishes supported Jiang Pengji's choice unconditionally. Of course, there was a small group of salted fishes who felt that something was wrong, but they could not put their finger on it. When everyone was discussing how to distribute the troops, they were shocked to discover that Jiang Pengji was not in the starting lineup. Jiang Pengji, who had been fighting at the front lines all year round, was actually in the middle of the army? Gao Ju Peng Si Shipidaki. Wait. Streamer, why aren't you at the front lines anymore? I'm not used to it. After following the live stream for so many years, their favorite segment was to see Jiang Pengji persistently wanting to go to the front lines. The civil and military officials tried their best to stop her. They had a heart attack, but they had no choice but to accept Jiang Pengji's willfulness. Such an interesting segment was gone today. Not only were the salted fishes not used to it, but Yang Saifengzhen and the others were also at a loss. They looked at Jiang Pengji, and Jiang Pengji looked back at them with a serious expression. Both parties looked at each other for more than 10 seconds. The air fell into an awkward and strange silence. Do you have any other opinions? Jiang Pengji glanced at the entire setup. There should not be any loopholes. Why did everyone look like they were stupid? Why did they not go and prepare for battle after receiving the military order? Why were they here staring at her? My lord, did you miss something? Lian asked cautiously. What did I miss? I didn't miss anything. What did I miss? Jiang Pengji looked puzzled. Fu Wang suddenly coughed awkwardly. He cupped his fists and bade farewell. Time to go, time to go. Fu Wang left. As if awakened from a dream, the others got up in twos and threes. After leaving the main tent, Li Yun still had a dreamy look on his face. My lord has really turned over a new leaf? Bah, what do you mean by turning over a new leaf? Isn't this pretty good? Go and do what you have to do. Yang Si slapped Li Yun's shoulder, interrupting him to prevent him from saying something even more appalling and stupid. My lord's ears are very sharp. Li Yun nodded repeatedly and left in a hurry, as if there was a monster chasing him from behind. Jiang Peng. Chapter 1653. Did these people think she was deaf? If they really wanted to make things up behind her back, they could at least do it from a distance. At such a close distance, what was the difference between that and making things up in front of her? Yang Si and the others are becoming more and more like princesses. They're super hard to please. Jiang Pengji couldn't help but shake her head. She had a helpless but doting expression. In the past, she always wanted to lead the vanguard troops and wanted to use herself as a general. They tried their best to stop her, almost crying and hanging themselves. When they couldn't stop them, they would show a wronged and helpless expression, making people feel guilty for no reason. Now that she had learned from her painful experience, she planned to make a fundamental change. Even honest people like Li Yun couldn't get used to it. It made it seem like it was her fault from the beginning to the end. Jiang Pengji felt wronged, but she didn't say it. Because all the officials had retreated, they didn't know that they were being blamed by their lord. Instead, it was the salted fish who felt it was unfair for them. Listen to what Jiang Pengji said. Shuring-chan, I can see that the streamer really doesn't know what's going on. Bao Xian, the little princess is the one who feels wronged. Doesn't your conscience hurt when you say that? Sitting on the grave and enjoying the moon. Oh, the streamer is a big pig trotter. She really should let little Rong Rong and the rest come back to listen to her and see her true colors. They're the ones who should feel wronged. Okay? Shuishuich was Hong's hoodie. Previously, people told me that the streamer has changed. I didn't believe it, but I didn't expect it to be true. Anyone who had some understanding of the streaming room knew Jiang Pengji's bad temper. As the saying goes, it's easy to change mountains and rivers, but hard to change a person's nature. It was quite torturous to let an unrestrained person who loved freedom be confined to the rear and watch others do as they pleased. The salted fish always thought that being diligent was her limit. When there was a war, she would definitely show her true colors. Who knew that she had really changed? She didn't even play in her favorite battlefield. You Abba, don't you feel uncomfortable watching this? Jiang Pengji said, I don't feel uncomfortable. I'm just not used to it. The 7th Corps was the Federation's first line of defense against the enemy. It was the sharpest knife. It was dispatched to wherever there was war. Even if she didn't like war, she had gotten used to it after so many years. Fighting was as common as eating and drinking to her. To have a person like her, who was born to fight, retreat to the rear and watch others rush to the battlefield, facing dangers that she didn't know if she would survive or not. She, who had combat strength, couldn't personally kill the enemy. Instead, she had to suppress the restless bloodthirst in her body. No matter how she looked at it, she wasn't used to it. However, even if he was not used to it, he had to get used to it. Jiang Pengji took a deep breath and suppressed that feeling. You're Abba. You'll have to get used to it sooner or later. Speaking of which, aren't you worried that something will happen to them on the battlefield? The old chief knew what kind of person Jiang Pengji was. She loved the battlefield. Other than the bloodthirst in her bones, it was mostly for the sake of others. The more enemies she killed, the fewer enemies the others had to face. Naturally, the pressure on them would lessen. Of course, she couldn't say these mushy words out loud. Outsiders could only experience it for themselves. As expected, Jiang Pengji denied it. Why should I worry about them? They're not 3-year-old kids. They don't need me to look after them on the battlefield. A general is a profession where one's head is tied to one's belt. If they're afraid of death, they won't be able to make a living, Jiang Pengji said. Worry? There's no shadow of it. You're Abba. Huh. A woman who says one thing but means another. Jiang Pengji didn't think that she was saying one thing but meant one thing. There was no one else in the world who was more consistent than her. I, Jiang Pengji, have never been a hypocrite. I say whatever I want to say. She said it righteously and sternly. The old chief coldly replied with 2 words, haha. The old chief is a decent person. Don't learn bad things from the group of salted fish in the streaming room. You should be dignified and dignified. Under the scourge of 5 million salted fish, Jiang Pengji couldn't look directly at those 2 words. Because behind every ha-ha was, I bought a watch last year. Seeing the sarcastic ha-ha, she knew that the old chief had learned a lot from the streaming room. Was his life so leisurely after retirement? You're Abba. Then I'll say something else. Jiang Xiaojiu, I advise you to have some sense of propriety. Jiang Pengji. At the end of the meeting, the starting lineup for the match against Shui was basically confirmed. Apart from a few familiar faces, Jiang Pengji also promoted a few young faces. However, newcomers meant that they were young and inexperienced. It was easy for them to be taken advantage of when they met with veterans on the battlefield. Under normal circumstances, many people preferred to use experienced or capable veterans. For new generals, unless they had outstanding military exploits or impressive combat abilities, they had to wait for a few years. It was rare for Jiang Pengji to promote newcomers as frequently as she did. Why? Previously, she was short of people and had to promote newcomers. Now that she's not short of people, shouldn't she prioritize safety? Could it be that she's still guarding against us? Yang Tao rarely came up with a conspiracy theory, but his conjecture was so crude that it made people speechless. It doesn't seem like it. Even though we haven't had much contact, based on our observations these days, Lu Lanting isn't a two-faced villain. If Jiang Pengji was the kind of villain who said she would promote people to important positions but secretly schemed against them, Yang Tao wouldn't have such a good impression of her. It's not about the lack of people. Yin Lin wanted to explain, but seeing that Yang Tao was confused, he gave a simple example. If Zhengze was a talented general who had been suppressed for many years and had no hope of being promoted, what would you think? After a long time, even if you don't resent him, you'll lose the will to improve. You'll either be depressed and resentful of the world, or completely dispirited and muddle along. If the enemy sent someone to instigate a rebellion and gave him a bright future, very few people wouldn't be tempted. Lu Lanting boldly promoted newcomers and gave them a chance to be promoted. Not only could she nurture young talents, but it was also a way for her to win people's hearts. That's why there's less infighting under Lu Lanting's banner. Most infighting in the world was due to political views, while the rest was due to conflicts of interest. In other words, there were too many monks and too little porridge. With so many monks trying to snatch the same bowl of porridge, they got angry and naturally started fighting over it. How could this conflict be resolved? Most of the feudal lords tried to mediate between the two monks. They tried to persuade one monk to live harmoniously and the other monk to focus on the bigger picture. There was no solution to the question of who should get the bowl of porridge. This method was to smooth things over. In the end, the fight would still be fought. Jiang Pengji was different. When others fought over a bowl of porridge, she did not step forward to mediate. Instead, she took out a few steam buns. Even though it was risky, Yin Lin thought it was a good way to solve the root of the problem. I see. Chapter 1654. It was still a chilly spring, and the snow had just melted. The air was filled with a cold chill. However, the coolness of the outside world could not cool down in Shui's rising fury. No one expected that Jiang Pengji would use a method that harmed others without benefiting herself. There was still half a month before the spring plowing. This made Shui wonder if the other party had gone mad, to be so hot-tempered. Even a war had to be fought according to the basic laws. Jiang Pengji actually destroyed the spring plowing. Was she planning to fly into the sky? It was common knowledge that spring plowing was the first major event of the year, and Shui had sent people to prepare early on, expending a lot of manpower and resources. As long as this year's harvest was good and there was enough food, Jiang Pengji had nothing to fear. He had never expected that she would play her cards so unconventionally. She would risk her own spring plowing to attack Shui. By now, she had already crossed the river and torn down Shui's fence. When Shui heard the news in the morning, her happiness from the new year was washed away. When did this happen? Why did you only report it now? And couldn't help but ask again, thinking that she was hallucinating. The soldier who delivered the message repeated nervously, "My lord, 3 days ago, Lu Shi's troops attacked our border town and forced their way across the Biling River. It happened so suddenly that the defending general was patrolling outside and carelessly let the enemy take advantage of a loophole. In the end, he had no choice but to retreat 30 miles. And Shui heard it clearly now, and his face turned green. Biling River was a river that lay between Jiangpengji and Shui. The surface of the river was 7 miles long, which was about 3,500 meters. This river was also one of the main streams of water in Nanshan. It irrigated both sides of the river and fed countless people. Because the soil here was fertile and easy to water, coupled with the fact that Nanshan was located in the south, the climate was humid, and they could harvest crops twice a year. And Shui still hoped that this place could alleviate the food shortage and give him the capital to fight Jiangpengji for a long time. He never expected that Jiangpengji would suddenly make things difficult for him. Not only did she disrupt the spring plowing, but she also seized this piece of fat meat. And Shui was slapped awake by reality. His face was ashen, and 2 flames of anger danced in the depths of his eyes, as if he wanted to burn everything he saw. In his anger, and Shui used his sleeve to sweep away all the things piled up on the table, causing them to crash to the ground. Everyone heard the news and rushed over, just in time to see it. No one dared to provoke her at this time. They could only secretly glance at Hua Yuan, hoping that he would say something to appease them. Hua Yuan did not let them down. He stepped forward and bowed. "My lord, please calm down." And Shui said, "How can I calm my anger? Do you know what Lu Shi did? She's crazy." Hua Yuan naturally knew what had happened. Otherwise, he would not have been called over. Things have already been decided. No matter how angry my lord is, it doesn't change anything. For now, the most important thing is to think of a way to deal with Lu Shi's army. At the same time, we need to hold the defending general accountable for his negligence. Hua Yuan's light words had changed the subject, and Shui had nowhere to vent his anger. The others in the tent felt a chill run down their spines when they heard this. Why? According to the content of the battle report, the defending general did not neglect his duty at all. Jiangpengji sent a large number of troops to attack the place, and the defending general could not defend it no matter how hard he tried. Furthermore, the 2 sides of the Biling River were wide open, and there were basically no guarded passes. Jiangpengji was also an expert in land warfare. The Steel Horsemen under her command had even defeated the 3 tribes of the northern borderline who had once dominated the grasslands of the northern borderline. How could a mere 20 to 30,000 soldiers trip her up? It was the biggest joke in the world. Hua Yuan's way of changing the subject had calmed Shui's anger, but had also brought an undeserved disaster to the defending general. And Shui calmed down a little. Panting heavily, he asked, "Do you have a good plan? I'm incompetent. I can't share my lord's burden." Hua Yuan blamed himself, then changed the topic and shifted the blame. Hearing this, everyone secretly cursed him for being cunning. He said, "But my lord has a lot of talented people under your command. You can gather everyone's wisdom and strength to come up with a countermeasure." And Shui glanced at the hesitant officials around him. His mood, which had just improved, fell again. Apart from Hua Yuan, the others were like good-for-nothings who could not do anything. They were like worms who ate the lord's salary, but could not share his burden. From the moment they entered until now, apart from Hua Yuan, who dared to speak in spite of his anger, the others were like mutes, not uttering a single word. Therefore, although Hua Yuan did not come up with a plan, and Shui was even more satisfied with him, he even sighed in his heart that Hua Yuan was the most loyal and devoted person in the world. Lu Zheng's presence was getting weaker and weaker. He had been in the background during the new year. How could Shui think of him? Everyone had been forced to do something beyond their abilities by Hua Yuan. After offering their suggestions, they did not get anything out of it, because Shui only cared about Hua Yuan. After they dispersed, everyone left the main tent in twos and threes, intentionally or unintentionally isolating Hua Yuan. There was something strange about this matter. Although Hua Yuan had made many contributions, in terms of weight, Lu Zheng was clearly more important. In the end, his lord and Shui seemed to have taken the wrong medicine and trusted Hua Yuan wholeheartedly. Especially after the new year, he almost wanted to worship Hua Yuan. From time to time, he would talk to him by candlelight, and the two of them would sleep together. Even Lu Zheng had not valued him this much back then. There were even people who disliked Hua Yuan who mocked him behind his back. Hua Yuan was not the #1 strategist in Shui's tent at all. He was clearly the #1 strategist in someone else's tent. Of course, these words would not reach Hua Yuan's ears. They had all seen this man's cruelty. How would they dare to rush to their deaths? On the other hand, Lu Zheng, speaking of which, they had not seen Lu Zheng for a long time. He did not appear even after such a huge incident had happened today. What was Lu Zheng doing? Some people said that his heart had been hurt by Shui. Now that he had been frozen, he was disheartened and staying at home. Some people said that Lu Zheng had been suppressed by Hua Yuan and had fallen into depravity because he was bored. He was addicted to women and could not extricate himself. No one knew that Lu Zheng was addicted to his daughter and had no heart for proper business. In fact, before Jiang Pengji's troops had forcefully crossed Bailing River, he had a premonition. Outsiders did not understand her, but Lu Zheng knew her temperament. It was not difficult to deduce her actions based on her temperament and style. When the incident at Bailing River came, Lu Zheng's first reaction was to frown. Something was wrong. He could deduce this even when he was at home. There was no reason that Hua Yuan did not know about the mental illness. If he knew, why did he not warn Shui in advance and send troops to guard against it? Lu Zheng felt uncomfortable all over when he thought of that lunatic Hua Yuan. Carry it first. Come back in 2 hours for a spot check. Lu Zheng assigned the homework casually and strode away. Kong Shintong held the heavy bamboo slips and recited them loudly without any complaints. Kong Shintong was born into an aristocratic family. Her biological father had also hired a teacher to teach her. This helped her build a solid foundation, so she learned quickly. Compared to Kong Shintong's enthusiasm for learning, Lu Zheng did not have much energy in the following half a month. He even missed his lectures. Kong Shintong asked with concern, "What's wrong, Godfather? Could it be that something troublesome has happened to you?" Lu Zheng frowned and said, "The situation at the front line worries me." Hua Yuan seemed to have taken the wrong medicine again. Recently, he had been working but not putting in any effort. He had been slacking all day. Chapter 1655. Compared to Lu Zheng's heaviness and worry, Kong Shintong's voice was much livelier. I happened to overhear it. I heard that the Duke of Lanting's morale is very high. Lu Zheng glanced at his adopted daughter indifferently and raised his hand to smack her forehead, telling her to watch her words. Kong Shintong was his adopted daughter after all. Why was she so excited when the enemy was mentioned? People who did not know better would think that Kong Shintong was Jiang Pengji's daughter. Kong Shintong's lips curled into a pretty smile. She was not afraid of Lu Zheng's warning at all. Perhaps it was because she had been eating and sleeping well these days. Her originally thin chin had become rounder. She looked more and more likable. Seeing her smile, Lu Zheng felt gratified and frowned at the same time. Even though he fed Kong Shintong chicken soup and told her that looks were innate and not to care too much, the reality was that reality had a natural malice towards good-looking women, especially in troubled times. A gentleman will not be imposing if he is not serious. No matter when, where, and who you are facing, you have to control your emotions. You can't be brash and give people the impression that you're frivolous and rude. Lu Zheng taught his adopted daughter seriously. He sounded righteous and strict, but in fact, he had a lot of personal opinions. Kong Shintong looked like she was being taught, but she did not take it to heart. She had only smiled at her foster father just now. How was that frivolous, impolite, and reckless? Besides, father, a gentleman will not be imposing if he is not serious. Is this from the Analects of Confucius? Kong Shintong did have some basic knowledge, but the Analects of Confucius was too profound for her back then. The teacher that her parents hired had not even taught her that much. Recently, Lu Zheng grabbed her to revise the Analects of Confucius, but Kong Shintong was still at the stage of rote memorization. Lu Zheng said, "A gentleman will not be imposing if he is not serious. He will not be firm if he learns." The meaning of this sentence could be understood literally, but Kong Shintong, who had always been intelligent, was surprised. Lu Zheng thought she did not understand and asked, "What do you not understand?" "Feel free to ask." Kong Shintong took out a roll of bamboo slips and opened it for Lu Zheng to see. She pointed at the sentence on the bamboo slips. "According to my adoptive father, a gentleman will not be imposing if he is not serious." Serious means sincere and solemn, but the note on the bamboo slips is not. Notes? The bamboo slips of the Analects of Confucius that Kong Shintong was currently using were the ones he had used when he was still a student. He had memorized every word on it by heart, so there was no need for him to flip through the bamboo slips again and again. If it wasn't for the fact that he wanted to teach Kong Shintong the Analects of Confucius, he wouldn't have taken out these bamboo slips. Although he hadn't read it for many years, he didn't remember what he had written on it. Bamboo slips were different from other materials. It was inconvenient to engrave words on them, and if one engraved too many words, it would shorten the lifespan of the bamboo slip. Because of his excellent memory, Lu Zheng rarely engraved any annotations on it. He curiously took the bamboo slip from Kong Shintong's hand and opened it to take a look. He discovered that the words "a gentleman who is not heavy will not be imposing" next to the words "petty bourgeois." The heavier one was, the fatter one was. Lu Zheng. In other words, according to the explanation, the meaning of this sentence was twisted into, if a gentleman is not fat, he is not dignified enough? Which bastard carved words on his bamboo slips? It was one thing to carve words, but wasn't he afraid that the saint wouldn't be able to hold him down if he explained it to the saint? Godfather, this annotation. Kong Shintong muttered softly. Was it carved by Godfather? Lu Zheng glanced at the handwriting and realized that it was somewhat familiar. He stared at it again and remembered who it was. No, it's impossible. Lu Zheng denied it thrice. Kong Shintong knew how precious books were. Her godfather didn't come from a good family background, so he should cherish it more. If the person who engraved the words was not someone he trusted, he wouldn't have the chance to create trouble on it. Therefore, she was curious. Which deity had made such annotations? Who was it? Lu Zheng threw the bamboo slip on the table and curled his lips. Who else could it be other than that foppish Lu Shi? That's right, the annotations were left behind by Jiang Pengji. Lu Zheng didn't know the specific time, but it was most likely before he left Langyi County. Kong Shintong's little mouth opened slightly. She was stunned for a while, then she suddenly burst into laughter. The Duke of Lanting actually had such a cute and mischievous side when he was young. The expressionless Lu Zheng. Shouldn't a normal person's first reaction upon seeing such a ridiculous annotation be to say that Jiang Pengji was a bad student? But the person? Mischievous? What kind of description was that? She wasn't a fan filter. She was obviously blind. Lu Zheng suddenly felt a little remorseful. Did he overcorrect his goddaughter? She was his goddaughter, but she was a fan of Jiang Pengji. That was too much. Oomph. Lu Zheng snorted in disdain. He took out a knife and a brush from his sleeve, ready to scrape away the nonsense Jiang Pengji had left behind. Unexpectedly, Kong Shintong refused. She grabbed the bamboo slip and hugged it in her arms. Her face was full of expectation, and her eyes were pleading. Let me translate. These were the words personally engraved by her idol. She had to keep them and not scrape them off. Lu Zheng held the knife and brush in his hand. He didn't know whether to take them, or put them away. Kang Shintong took advantage of Lu Zhang's hesitation and hid the bamboo slip behind her. She changed the topic abruptly. Godfather, the situation at the front line isn't optimistic. Don't the others have any countermeasures? Lu Zhang was silent for a while. He quietly put away the knife and brush and resumed his serious expression. There are countermeasures. Although the people under the Lord's command have their own agendas, not all of them are mediocre. If that's the case, why are you so worried? If they have countermeasures, they naturally have the ability to solve it. Kang Shintong spoke rather bluntly. She had been with Lu Zhang for a long time and had a deeper understanding of him. This godfather was good in every way, but Shui had eyes but failed to see and sheltered him. Why didn't Shui think about how her godfather had accompanied him through his lowest times? What was the difference between him and a scumbag who abandoned his wife when he struck it rich? Trash. Pig trotters. Kang Shintong didn't like Shui. She couldn't wait for him to die. Lu Zhang said, I'm afraid that someone has the ambition of a wolf. I don't know what evil plans they have in the dark. Kang Shintong didn't understand. Will the people under Lord Shui's command harm him? Lu Zhang sneered. Why not? Some people have lost their minds and gone mad. They can't be treated as normal people. If that's the case, will you remind Lord Shui? Kang Shintong asked carefully. Lu Zhang sneered. Remind? Huh. It was useless to remind him. Lu Zhang wasn't someone who liked to pester others. He was already disgusted by Shui's repeated suicidal acts. 2 days after this conversation, Shui gathered the army and prepared to set off. Lu Zhang, the background, was dragged along as well. Shui thought of Lu Zhang, not because he still had a conscience and cherished old friendships, but because of Hua Yuan's recommendation. No scumbag would think of himself as scumbag, much less think that neglecting someone else was his fault. What else could Lu Zhang be dissatisfied with if Shui was willing to put Lu Zhang in an important position again? In order to maintain this scumbag mentality, Shui had planned to have Lu Zhang guard the rear. In the end, this decision was sternly rejected by Hua Yuan. For Shui to leave a great talent like Lu Zhang behind in the rear was simply a reckless waste of God's gift. What does Hua Yuan want to do? What does he want to do? Hua Yuan sneered. Chapter 1656. Is Godfather going to follow the army into battle? Kang Shintong had been living in Lu Zhang's residence for a while now, and their relationship had improved by leaps and bounds. When she saw Lu Zhang instruct the housekeeper to pack his luggage with a grave expression, she knew that something had happened outside. She heard that the front line was extremely dangerous, and her godfather had been neglected by Shui for a long time. She didn't know why he was suddenly put in an important position. Hua Yuan recommended me to the Lord, so she ordered me to follow the army into battle. Stay at home and wait for me to return. You mustn't neglect your studies when I'm not home. You'll be tested when I return. Lu Zhang didn't have experience as a teacher, but he had experience as a student. His master, Master Yuan Jing, had taught his students in the same way back then. There was a limit to how much he could relax. Even though Kang Shintong was a self-disciplined, studious, and practical child, she was still a teenager. Her self-control wasn't as good as an adult's, and it was easy for her to be distracted by the flowers and plants of the outside world. Lu Zhang was worried that Kang Shintong would neglect her studies when he wasn't around. I will remember Godfather's teachings. Kang Shintong agreed, but she asked in confusion, It's a good thing that Lord Shui put you in an important position again. Why does Godfather look so preoccupied? Is it because of Master Hua Yuan's recommendation? She had vaguely heard servants mention that her godfather and Hua Yuan didn't get along. However, her godfather didn't admit it himself, so Kang Shintong couldn't discuss it in private. I have some conflicts with him, and we've never been on good terms. Lu Zhang didn't avoid the topic and said directly, as the saying goes, there must be something wrong when something is out of the ordinary. He's not a kind-hearted person. Who knew if his expression of goodwill was genuine or just another scheme? I'm worried that he's up to something again, so I have to be on guard. However, The Lord trusts him so much that I can't do anything to him. The conflict between Hua Yuan and Lu Zheng was well known. He had been suppressing Lu Zheng both openly and secretly, so how could he give him a chance to turn things around? He was afraid that there was some kind of conspiracy, such as luring the tiger away from the mountain and taking advantage of LV Zheng going to the front line to stir up trouble in the rear, or that there was some kind of trap waiting for LV Zheng to jump into at the front line, or that there was some kind of conspiracy at the front line. All of these were possible. Even though LV Zheng's suspicions were very reasonable and well-founded, it also proved one thing. Hua Yuan, a dangerous individual with a split personality, had left a deep psychological shadow on him. So much so that LV Zheng was a little paranoid and always had a conspiracy theory about everything. When Kang Xintong heard this, she had a bold idea. Your daughter has a matter that I hope Godfather will agree to. She swallowed nervously and said tentatively, It's already unfilial of me to not share my father's burden when he's with the army. I don't dare to let him worry about me when he's at the front. If that's the case, why don't you? Under Lu Zheng's stern gaze, Kang Xintong's voice gradually became softer and softer until it could not be heard. Her little head also drooped down. Why not what? Why didn't you say anything? Lu Zheng asked with a spurious smile. His eyes that seemed to be able to see through one's heart were filled with understanding. You don't dare to say it? Then let me guess and see if I've guessed what you're thinking. Do you want to follow the army to the front? Even if Kang Xintong's idol was Jiang Pingji, he couldn't be so bold if he wanted to imitate his idol. Could he? Jiang Pingji had a sizable female battalion under her command. Over the years, they had risen to fame and made a name for themselves, making their enemies tremble in fear. However, Shui did not have such conditions. Kang Xintong was a girl. If LV Zheng did not take good care of her, who knew when something would happen to her? The front line was full of swords and sabers. It was too dangerous. I advise you to give up on this idea as soon as possible. LV Zheng quite liked this clever and obedient adopted daughter. How could he bear to let her go to the front line and court death? At the end of the day, it was Lu Lanting's fault. He did not teach good things and taught bad things to children. LV Zheng smiled in his heart and patted the little man. The two words Lu Shi were written on the man's body. His black resentment was almost overflowing. Her foster father's rejection was within Kang Xintong's expectations. She gave a fawning smile, got up from the mat, and went behind LV Zheng. She rubbed his shoulders attentively and said softly, Foster father, you are indeed my foster father. I can't hide my cleverness from you. Humph, Carrot, it was useless even if the little girl had a sweet mouth. LV Zheng did not fall for it verbally, but he enjoyed it in his heart. The front line is very dangerous. There's chaos everywhere. If you're not careful, you'll lose your life. It's for your own good that I'm not letting you go. Moreover, the army camp is not as simple as you think. There are a bunch of rough and barbaric men there. I dare not guarantee your safety. You're a delicate girl. You'll easily get into trouble if you go. LV Zheng tried to dispel her thoughts. His idol was so arrogant because he had the ability to survive at the front line. That person could enter an army of thousands without batting an eyelid. She did not have the ability to do so, so she did not want to die. Of course, Kang Xintong's courage was worthy of recognition. Ordinary girls would not have the courage to say that they wanted to go to the front line. Kang Xintong's expression darkened when LV Zheng saw through her thoughts. She immediately became determined, and her eyes were filled with determination. She really wanted to go to the front line. How could she grow faster by staying in the rear and enjoying the protection of a greenhouse? She was not afraid, even if she might face the dangers that LV Zheng mentioned. She also wanted to see how big the world was, as LV Zheng had said. She immediately begged LV Zheng, Godfather, you're always thinking of me. I'm afraid that I'll let you down. What's so good about the front line that it's worth all of you going there? Don't you know that people will die? Other than me, there's someone else like you. LV Zheng said, Isn't Lu Shi the one who taught you bad things? Humph, the culprit of all conflicts. Kang Xintong said seriously, Godfather, I've always remembered what you told me. However, reading 10,000 books is not as good as walking 10,000 miles. No matter how much I read, it's still not as good as seeing with my own eyes. I'm short-sighted, so I naturally have to see more. LV Zheng sighed helplessly. He raised his hand and pulled Kong Shintong up, making her kneel on the ground look unbecoming. You can go, but you have to promise me that your own safety is the most important. If she went to the front line, LV Zheng could not guarantee Kong Shintong's safety. Whether it was a blessing or a curse, she would have to bear it herself. Since Kong Shintong was so persistent, LV Zheng could not force her. Of course, if his own flesh and blood disobeyed him like this, he would probably explode and break their legs. Kong Shintong did not expect LV Zheng to be so easy to talk to. She was already prepared to be rejected for the second time. Thus, when LV Zheng agreed, she almost did not react in time. When she came back to her senses, she quickly said, "Thank you, Godfather." Chapter 1657. Lu Zheng made it sound serious, but in fact, it was not that dangerous. Kong Shintong was young to begin with, so it was not out of place for her to disguise as a man. Lu Zheng also ordered people to keep an eye on her at all times. As long as Kong Shintong did not seek death and go to places she should not go, she would not be in any danger in the military camp. Unless the enemy directly launched a sneak attack on our camp, then there was nothing we could do. Moreover, Lu Zheng was a strategist, not a general. He spent most of his time in the barracks, so he could definitely protect this little girl. Lu Zheng did not hide Kong Shintong's matter from Shui and informed him in advance. Shui had vaguely heard that Lu Zheng had adopted a daughter, but he did not expect that he would bring her to the military camp. Take it with you, as long as it doesn't interfere with important matters. Shui had no objections, so the matter was settled. The army set off. Lu Zheng followed Shui on horseback, but Hua Yuan was nowhere to be seen. Seeing this, Lu Zheng felt even more uneasy. He pretended to casually ask the people around him about Hua Yuan's whereabouts. "Why don't I see Hua Yuan?" Lu Zheng whispered to a strategist he was on good terms with. His eyes were still wandering around, trying to find a familiar figure. He said, "The Lord can't leave the flower abyss. He can't wait to take her wherever he goes. Why can't I see her today?" The other party asked, "You don't know?" Lu Zheng shook his head. "I really don't know." The other party continued. This time, the enemy is coming in full force, but Lu Shi still sent out his troops despite the spring plowing. It's obvious that he's made up his mind. If we want to defend against the enemy, we don't know how long this battle will take. I'm afraid we won't have enough rations. The Lord has sent Hua Yuan to collect military provisions and supplies. Lu Zheng's heart skipped a beat. Is there not enough food? How much rations do we have? How long can it support the army? Lu Zheng had gradually become disconnected from political affairs during his time in the cold. His understanding of the military camp had fallen behind. Roughly speaking, we should be able to last until early winter. Why is it only early winter? According to Lu Zheng's estimation, the provisions they had in reserve could last them until the end of spring and the beginning of summer next year. Of course, it wouldn't matter even if he couldn't hold on. Rations were precious in any period of time, not to mention in this chaotic world where rations were the hard currency. If there really was a food shortage, not only would they have to think of ways to increase income, but they would also have to do their best to reduce expenditure. If there was no other choice, then he could only use special methods to get through this difficult period of time. Even so, Lu Zheng still felt that Shui and Hua Yuan were too wasteful. During the days when he was frozen, the two of them were quite extravagant. They were like the foolish sons of a landlord. The more foolish people have, the faster the money comes. The foundation that Lu Zheng had accumulated over the years was going to be destroyed by them. He had a rough idea in his heart, but he didn't expect the truth to be worlds apart from his conjecture. We should have been able to last longer. After all, our army benefited a lot from the incident last year. But all these years, Lu Shi had swept through the lands. Hadn't he relied on the elites under his command? Now that the army was at the borders, the Lord was extremely fearful of her. She was afraid that the army would not be strong enough, so she had been recruiting soldiers and training elites. Last year, the Lord sent people to select 150,000 strong youth from the 2 prefectures and send them to the military camp. 150,000? Lu Zheng's voice almost cracked. Was he hallucinating? Are you sure it's 150,000 and not 15,000? This is simply nonsense. Lu Zheng didn't care that Shui was not far away. He widened his eyes and scolded them. Not only were Shui and Hua Yuan prodigal sons, but they were also kicked in the head by a donkey? How could there be such a good thing in this world? One wanted the horse to run fast, but also wanted the horse to eat less and drink less. These youths were all mouths that were crying piteously for food. They ate grains. They were neither wooden oxen nor immortals. They couldn't eat wind and drink dew. If they were trained as elites, their daily meals would be at least twice as much as that of ordinary soldiers. There were so many mouths to feed all of a sudden. Didn't Shui really think that food didn't need money? The incident last year that he mentioned was referring to the incident wherein Shui fortified the walls and cleared the fields to trick Jiangpingji last year. He took all the benefits for himself and plundered the food reserves of the 2 prefectures. In the end, he threw a group of old, weak, sick, and disabled people to Jiangpingji and made her worry about food. In Lu Zheng's opinion, Shui shouldn't have wanted those youths last year. It would have been enough to just plunder the food reserves. He should have thrown the youths, the weak, the sick, and the disabled to Jiangpingji, making her worry about food. If she could solve it, she would be considered capable. If she couldn't, she could send someone to secretly instigate the youths to revolt and attack the granary to snatch food. It would also be a good opportunity for Lu Zheng to see Jiangpingji being pressured into a terrible state. It was a pity that Shui refused to listen. He had already been bewitched by Hua Yuan, the little b asterisk tch. 150,000 more mouths to feed out of thin air. How will there be enough food for our army? Shui had previously annexed the various feudal lords of Nansheng and absorbed their military forces. The number of troops under his command was already very large. The youths from the 2 prefectures that had just been absorbed had no combat experience. They were only there to wave the flag and shout battle cries, and at the same time, they were also there to give the enemy heads an experience. However, Hua Yuan wanted to challenge Lu Zheng to a duel. Due to various disadvantages, Lu Zheng couldn't defeat him. His master, Shui, was also greedy and couldn't bear to part with the youths. He was afraid that these youths would become Jiangpingji's daggers against him, so he insisted on taking them home and digesting them himself. Look, now you know the consequences of being too greedy and inconsiderate, right? You've lifted a rock and dropped it on your own feet. Lu Zheng felt a little stuffy in his chest, as if someone had stabbed him with a knife. His lord, Shui, used to be so reliable. Why did he become so arrogant after he became rich? He could be arrogant if he wanted to, but he should at least wait until the dust settled on the enemy, right? The enemy hadn't even knelt down, yet he was the first to lose his cool. Was he planning to give his head to Jiangpingji? Lu Zheng cursed in his heart, but he didn't know if he should say it. Lower your voice. Do you want to die? The man tugged at Lu Zheng's sleeve and warned him in a low voice. He secretly raised his head and glanced in Shui's direction. He realized that Shui was looking in his direction. His pitch-black eyes were devoid of any emotion. Under such a gaze, he couldn't help but shiver. He quickly lowered his head to avoid eye contact. Lu Zheng tightened his grip on the reins and snorted coldly in a low voice. It's time for you to change your personality. It's not like you don't know the Lord's temperament. If you insist on being stubborn, you'll be the one who suffers. The onlooker sees the game more clearly than the person directly involved. Why was Shui close to Hua Yuan and distant from Lu Zheng? It wasn't because Lu Zheng wasn't capable enough. It was clearly because Lu Zheng's temperament had made his lord, Shui, unhappy for a long time. He felt that Lu Zheng might be put in a difficult position again. As it turned out, Shui wasn't as petty as he thought. Indeed, he didn't like Lu Zheng, but he wouldn't ignore the bigger picture and leave such a capable person like Lu Zheng to rot in a corner. Now was the time to use people. Lu Zheng still had to use him when he needed to. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.